Chapter 57-52. Zhuqiuqing followed Kang Xinmu's footsteps, and Kang Xinmu stopped when he noticed Zhuqiuqing following him. Cultivators had always been straightforward. When Kang Xinmu saw Zhuqiuqing following him, he knew that Zhuqiuqing had something to discuss with him. "Young brother, I wonder if you know of the bipolar mirror?" Zhuqiuqing naturally noticed Kang Xinmu's intentions, and he took a step forward while maintaining a safe distance from Kang Xinmu before he asked. "I've never heard of it." Kang Xinmu had indeed never heard of the bipolar mirror. Perhaps it was a summoning magic tool like the 8-god star disc, or perhaps he'd encountered it in the past. However, he was very sure that he didn't possess the bipolar mirror. The bipolar mirror can open up the boundaries of the world, and it's slightly similar to the Star Atlas lock. However, it's more limited than the Star Atlas lock as it can only open up the boundaries of the world. It can be considered to be an extremely formidable teleportation talisman. Zhuqiuqing glanced deeply at Kang Xinmu as he spoke like this. As soon as he spoke like this, Kang Xinmu came to an understanding. But in his memory, he really hadn't encountered the bipolar mirror. Kang Xinmu naturally knew that Zhuqiuqing was looking for a way to return to the other world. "I wonder if the Star Atlas lock can open up the boundaries of the world?" Kang Xinmu hesitated for a moment before he asked. "It can't." Zhuqiuqing shook his head with an extremely solemn expression. Even though both of them are spatial magic tools, the Star Atlas lock is unable to open up the boundaries of the world, and it can only teleport at will within the scope of the same parallel world. These words allowed Kang Xinmu to understand the function of the Star Atlas lock. When he first heard of the existence of the Star Atlas lock, it was Senior Moya who told him that it could store the blood puppets. Later on, he went to look for the Star Atlas lock to store the blood puppets. Obtaining the Dermic seal and the power of Dermic might was just a coincidence. Up until now, he hadn't truly utilized the Star Atlas lock. The function of the Star Atlas lock had always been hearsay. Zhuqiuqing's explanation allowed Kang Xinmu to completely realize that the other world and the world he lived in didn't belong to the same world, and they were two completely different worlds. Since they were two different worlds, then all the questions in the other world could be answered. If the other world was also an independent world, it definitely wouldn't just have existences like the 4 great corpse ancestor clans. Presumably, the ancient spirits and the other races were only a small part of that world. Zhuqiuqing was a member of a clan in the other dimension. "I'm sorry, I don't know what the bipolar mirror is," Kang Xinmu said honestly. When he noticed that Kang Xinmu didn't seem to be lying, Zhuqiuqing spoke of the bewilderment in his heart. "The corpse talisman I have is a Dharma treasure that can sense Dharma treasures. Just now, the corpse talisman sensed the existence of the bipolar mirror, so I thought you had it." In the beginning, Zhuqiuqing had only wanted to return to the other side. When he noticed that Kang Xinmu had the bipolar mirror, he intended to sincerely exchange for the opportunity to use it. Zhuqiuqing could sense that Kang Xinmu's cultivation base was far stronger than his. There was even one thing that made Zhuqiuqing inexplicably feel respect for Kang Xinmu. No matter what, the Supreme Divine Flame that he possessed was at least at the 8th level, and the Supreme Divine Flame domain had even reached the 8th level. However, for some reason, such a powerful Supreme Divine power suddenly fell silent when it reached Jiang Xinwu's hands. It seemed to have encountered some kind of restraining force, and the Supreme Divine Flame automatically returned to his Qi meridians. This could only mean that Kang Xinmu also possessed the Supreme Divine Flame, and the level or grade of the Supreme Divine Flame far surpassed the Supreme Divine Flame. Zhuqiuqing wasn't wrong. Kang Xinmu originally cultivated the Supreme Divine Flame as well, and it attained the 9th level later on. When it reached the 9th level, the Supreme Godly Fire devoured the flame of the undead and evolved into the Supreme Godly Spirit Flame. The Supreme Divine Spirit Flame was above all other flames in the world. It wasn't exaggerated at all to say that the Supreme Divine Flame was the king of all flames in the world. "Can you tell me what the bipolar mirror looks like?" Kang Xinmu paused for a moment before he asked. Kang Xinmu wasn't afraid that Zhuqiuqing would suddenly attack him. Not to mention that he was from the other side, and he was a stranger in the outerium. Shi couldn't help but be curious when he heard that the bipolar mirror was so formidable. Let's leave the city first. Zhuqiuqing looked at the surroundings and spoke in a low voice. Kang Xinmu understood. Even though this street was bustling with people coming and going, all of them had their own thoughts in their hearts. As Zhuqiuqing and Kang Xinmu spoke, they'd drawn the attention of some people. Especially some people from the other side. They were extremely curious towards Kang Xinmu's identity when they saw Zhuqiuqing getting close to a person of unknown origins. Numerous cultivators from the sealed secret realm were gathered in this city, and there was no lack of people from the other side that had heard of some of Kang Xinmu's deeds. At this moment, they noticed Kang Xinmu, and they couldn't help but come over. Kang Xinmu? Someone directly shouted out Kang Xinmu's name. Zhuqiuqing had heard of Kang Xinmu's name, yet he'd never seen Kang Xinmu himself. Only now did he realize that this person by his side was actually Kang Xinmu, and he felt a wave of surprise. He'd always thought that Kang Xinmu, who'd turned the sealed secret realm upside down, would seem to be a cultivator with great experience, yet he'd never imagined that Kang Xinmu himself would actually be so young. Kang Xinmu noticed Zhuqiuqing's reaction and expression, and he smiled lightly. Zhuqiuqing didn't shrink back just because his little brother was Kang Xinmu, and he continued to follow Kang Xinmu out of the city. There were rules within the city, and when these cultivators from outside the city recognized Kang Xinmu, they didn't dare do anything to Kang Xinmu. After they left the city, they didn't have so many worries. Anyone who'd heard of Kang Xinmu's deeds was basically aware that Kang Xinmu possessed the star diagram lock, and he even possessed the fragment of the 7 devouring devil sealing technique. Supposedly, he possessed 2 fragments of the 7 devouring devil sealing technique at the same time. Zhuqiuqing, no wonder you were being secretive earlier. So it turns out that you know Kang Xinmu. As soon as they left the city, all the cultivators that came out from the secret realm converged over, and they surrounded Kang Xinmu and Zhuqiuqing. What do all of you want? Zhuqiuqing didn't avoid it at all. What do you think we have? At this moment, the cultivators that conversed with Zhuqiuqing earlier seemed as if they'd seen their prey when they saw Kang Xinmu. They were displeased by Zhuqiuqing's concealment. However, out of consideration for the clan that stood behind Zhuqiuqing, they didn't say anything. This group of people had already found out that Kang Xinmu was all alone this time. He wasn't from the outerium, nor was he from the other dimension. Independent cultivators like this were the epitome of being easy to bully. All of you want the star diagram lock. Kang Xinmu stood there and glanced at all the cultivators present here before he spoke indifferently. If you're sensible, then hand over the star diagram lock as soon as possible. Everyone looked at Kang Xinmu with ridicule. Zhuqiuqing couldn't help but frown when he saw this. Little brother. Zhuqiuqing felt slightly guilty. These people were able to notice Kang Xinmu because he'd suddenly asked about the bipolar mirror. It's fine. Chapter 57-53. The cultivators that left the city formed an encirclement of their own accord, and they obstructed the path of Kang Xinmu and Zhuqiuqing. The formation outside the city was not small, and it attracted the attention of many people in the city. One by one, they gathered at the city gate. Hurry up and hand over the star map lock. When he saw more and more people had gathered here, the cultivator that surrounded Kang Xinmu and Zhuqiuqing at the beginning shouted right away. There are so many of you, but there is only one star atlas lock. Who do you want me to hand it over to? Kang Xinmu raised his eyebrows and said lightly. As soon as he said that, all the cultivators present fell silent for a moment. This is a serious question. Before they came here, they had already discussed that they would take down Kang Xinmu first before considering the distribution of the Star Atlas lock. But in fact, there was only one Star Atlas lock. Once Kang Xinmu was handed over, the conflict would escalate due to the uneven distribution. Because of Kang Xinmu's words, the crowd hesitated for a moment. Then, one by one, they started arguing. Everyone, don't listen to his nonsense. We have to at least see the Star Atlas lock before we consider this. Someone cried out. The Star Atlas lock is here. Kang Shinmu didn't avoid it and took out the Star Atlas lock. The eyes of all the cultivators present lit up when they saw the star map lock in Kang Shinmu's palm. Is that the star map lock? It was the first time Wuxia Cheng had seen a Star Atlas lock, and he felt a wave of surprise. But young brother, I'm afraid it's disadvantageous to you if you take it out rashly. Wuxia Cheng glanced at everyone present here and spoke in a low voice. That depends on whether they have the ability or not. Kang Shinmu's lips curled into a faint smile. In the eyes of all the cultivators, the star map lock was their target. Now that Kang Shinmu had revealed the Star Atlas lock, all of them couldn't restrain their greed any longer, and they flashed forward to press straight towards Kang Shinmu. As long as he could obtain the Star Atlas lock, he would do anything. There was also a group of cultivators who were very interested in the remnant of the 7 devouring devil sealing art that Kang Shinmu possessed, and they also dashed forward. Everyone rushed forward, but Kang Shinmu still stood there without moving. He didn't even have the intention to make a move. Wuxia Cheng felt apologetic in his heart, and he intended to make a move to stop these people. Although he couldn't defeat this group of people in one fell swoop, he could at least create an opportunity to escape. Kang Shinmu saw the greed in these people's eyes and opened the star map lock without hesitation. A black shadow rushed out of it. It was Blood Puppet. The moment Bloodmane appeared, he turned into a black shadow, quickly bypassing the crowd. What is it? It looks like a blood manta. Exclamations of surprise could be heard from the crowd. Then, the black shadow circled back and flew into the Star Atlas lock. Kang Shinmu put away the Star Atlas lock again. The cultivators that surrounded them suddenly fell one by one, and it was unknown whether they were dead or alive. Wuxia Cheng and Kang Shinmu stood relatively close, so they naturally saw what came out of the Star Atlas lock. It was a heart-devouring blood puppet. This heart-devouring blood puppet was very fast, and it was very strong. It suddenly swept away the numerous cultivators that were flashing towards Kang Shinmu. When the blood puppet returned to the Star Atlas lock, an extremely dense smell of blood suddenly spread out. Kang Shinmu didn't even look back as he left this place with large strides. Wuxia Cheng glanced at the numerous cultivators that had already lost their vitality on the ground, and he left swiftly as well. The people in the city who wanted to come out and join in the fun were extremely shocked and they saw this scene. On the way, Wuxia Cheng roughly told Kang Shinmu about the bipolar mirror. He also told him about the bipolar mirror. When he heard about the bipolar mirror, Kang Shinmu felt it was unfamiliar. However, when he saw the appearance of the bipolar mirror, Kang Shinmu couldn't help but be stunned. Why did this bipolar mirror look a little similar to the inscription of the 7 devouring demons sealing art? Is this the bipolar mirror? Kang Shinmu frowned and asked. It's the bipolar mirror. Wuxia Cheng was very certain. Kang Shinmu could see that Wuxia Cheng wasn't lying. It was precisely because of this that he was puzzled. The bipolar mirror was actually the inscription of the 7 devouring demons sealing art? In order to verify it, Kang Shinmu activated the inscription of the 7 devouring demons sealing art. When he first obtained the fragment of the 7 devouring demons sealing art, Kang Shinmu couldn't activate the inscription of the 7 devouring demons sealing art on his own. It was the inscription of the 7 devouring demons sealing art that activated on its own. After the battle with Leng Zhanghong, Kang Shinmu obtained 2 fragments of the 7 devouring demons sealing art. Along the way, he absorbed many laws and successfully allowed the inscription of the 7 devouring demons sealing art to reach the peak of the first level. Presently, Kang Shinmu was able to activate the inscription of the 7 devouring demons sealing art on his own. At the instant he activated the inscription of the 7 devouring demons sealing art, Kang Shinmu felt a wave of shock. The appearance of the bipolar mirror that Wuxia Cheng revealed was really exactly similar to the inscription of the 7 devouring demons sealing art. Right when Kang Shinmu was pondering about this, Wuxia Cheng felt a wave of shock in his heart as well. Just earlier, his corpse talisman displayed a display related to the bipolar mirror. Moreover, the corpse talisman displayed that Kang Shinmu possessed the bipolar mirror. Zhuqiu Qing had asked Kang Shinmu earlier, and he discerned from Kang Shinmu's words that Kang Shinmu really didn't possess the bipolar mirror. But the reaction of the corpse talisman at this moment caused Zhuqiu Qing to be completely unable to figure out the situation. Suddenly, Zhuqiu Qing suddenly thought of a possibility. Kang Shinmu wasn't someone from the other world, whereas the bipolar mirror was a magic artifact that was born in the other world. Was there a possibility that Kang Shinmu had obtained the bipolar mirror by chance, yet he wasn't able to recognize that it was the bipolar mirror? Zhuqiu Qing thought like this, and Kang Shinmu had already confirmed it. The inscription of the 7 devouring demon sealing art was the bipolar mirror that Zhuqiu Qing spoke of. The bipolar mirror is an object of the other world, then does that mean that the inscription of the 7 devouring demon sealing art is an object of the other world as well? The fragment of the 7 devouring demon sealing art and the inscription of the 7 devouring demon sealing art are two different things? This question caused Kang Shinmu to be troubled. Kang Shinmu suddenly recalled that not long ago, the spirit that claimed to be the 7 devouring demon sealing art, Fengling used his own strength to summon the divine light to make an appearance. Now it was said that the inscription of the 7 devouring demon sealing art was the bipolar mirror. This couldn't help but cause Kang Shinmu to arouse suspicion towards Fengling's origins. You're saying that the bipolar mirror can open up the boundaries of the world? Asked Kang Shinmu in a low voice. Yes, only the bipolar mirror is capable of accomplishing that. Zhuqiu Qing was extremely certain. Kang Shinmu hesitated for a moment before he asked. Then what about the 8-god star plate? The 8-god star plate? Zhuqiu Qing spoke with surprise. Kang Shinmu's eyes narrowed slightly as he stared fixedly at Zhuqiu Qing, who stood before him. The 8-god starplate is similar to the bipolar mirror, but the nature of the 8-god starplate is an offensive magic artifact. Zhuqiu Qing spoke like this. These words caused Kang Shinmu to be bewildered. The 8-god starplate he knew was a type of summoning magic artifact, yet why has it actually become an offensive magic artifact in Zhuqiu Qing's hands? The possessor of the 8-god starplate is able to form a contract with the 8-god starplate and summon a contracted being from any world to be his main offensive force. Zhuqiu Qing paused for a moment before he spoke once more. Chapter 57-54. As for where the 8-god star disk first appeared, even I don't know. Zhuqiu Qing frowned tightly and pondered for a moment. He seemed to have thought of something and added, but that ancestor of the clan probably knows. Kang Shinmu silently committed all of this to memory. After he possessed the 8-god star disk, he was very clearly aware that the 8-god star disk lacked a foundation. It couldn't be considered to be the core of the disk, yet it was the most important part of the disk. He did not have the foundation of the 8-god star plate. He only knew from the current 8-god star plate that the 8-god star plate was a summoning artifact. According to Zhuqiu Qing, the 8-god star disk is an offensive magic artifact. Perhaps it was related to the foundation of the disk. No matter what, even though the disk is capable of forming a contract with the living beings of another world and summoning them to assist its possessor, the door that the contracted living being passes through is called the door of contract. The gate that the contracted life form passes through is called the gate of contract. Only the contracted life form can pass through it, and no one else can. Zhuqiu Qing let out a long sigh. Even if the 8-god star disk really was here and could open the door to the other world, he wouldn't be able to pass through it. If he wanted to return to the other world, then he could only rely on the bipolar mirror. The corpse talisman indicated that the bipolar mirror was in Kang Shinmu's possession, but it seemed like Kang Shinmu himself didn't know about the bipolar mirror. Presently, Zhuqiu Qing's thoughts had fallen into a state of confusion. He didn't even know if the corpse talisman senses had gone wrong or if Kang Shinmu hadn't concealed anything from him. Actually, if Kang Shinmu intended to conceal something, then he really didn't have the qualifications to interrogate Kang Shinmu. The reason Kang Shinmu asked about the 8-god star disk was because he wanted to know if Zhuqiu Qing could pass through the door to the other world that was opened by the disk. Now it would seem like Zhuqiu Qing couldn't pass through that door. Zhuqiu Qing seemed to be a member of a great clan in the other world, and he possessed a certain level of status and identity. It was obviously impossible for him to lower himself to be Kang Shinmu's contracted living being, so Kang Shinmu naturally didn't say anything. He was very interested in the bipolar mirror. He never expected that the 7 devouring devil sealing technique would actually be the bipolar mirror. Then, how could he activate the bipolar mirror? At this time, the 7 devouring devil sealing art was in a state of activation. Kang Shinmu carefully observed the slowly rotating 7 devouring devil sealing art engravings. From the looks of it, the 7 devouring devil sealing art really was like a mirror. The front was white and the back was black. It was like a double-sided mirror. It seemed reasonable to call it the bipolar mirror. Kang Shinmu attempted to carve the 7 devouring devil sealing art with his soul consciousness, attempting to open the so-called boundary of the world. Kang Shinmu concentrated his soul consciousness for a while, and finally saw the 2 sides of the 7 devouring devil sealing art gradually merge. It was as if an entrance had been opened, but it only lasted for less than a breath's time before disappearing. Is there no other way to go back? Kang Shinmu asked after a pause. It was possible that the mark of the 7 devouring devil sealing art was the bipolar mirror. However, to open the boundary of the world through the bipolar mirror, there were probably other methods or conditions that could not be opened in a short period of time. If I enter a secret realm that looks like the sealed secret realm again, should be able to go back by moving the secret realm on its own. Zhuqiu Cheng's expression was bitter. Of course, I have to ensure that the secret realm will pass through the other world during its movement. This answer, Kang Shinmu concluded that under the current situation, there was no other way to return to the other world other than using the bipolar mirror to open the boundary of the world. Experts of laws like that should be able to open the passage to the other world, right? Kang Shinmu pondered for a moment and said. Due to the fact that the bipolar mirror was the mark of the 7 devouring devil sealing art and was a rather special existence, he could not directly say that he had the bipolar mirror. That's possible. Zhuqiu Qing nodded. Then, little brother, I won't disturb you any longer. Farewell. Zhuqiu Qing bid farewell to Kang Shinmu and planned to gather the people from the other world who were stranded outside the realm. When they went to the sealed secret realm, Zhuqiu Qing was the first person in his family to enter the secret realm. Later on, there were others who followed him into the secret realm. The sealed secret realm was huge, but it could only maintain long-distance communication. This time, when the secret realm collapsed, they should be stranded outside the realm. In the process of gathering the other family members, he should also contact the 4 major sections. Kang Shinmu also left on his own. He wanted to go to the Heaven Origin Palace first. According to Tang Xiaoyu, a certain senior of the Dragon God clan had gone to the Heaven Origin Palace. In the outer realm, as long as the 4 major sects were mentioned, there was no one who did not know of them. It was just that the 4 major sects were very far away from each other. The place where Kang Shinmu was located was the closest to the Wuji Pavilion and the furthest from the Heaven Origin Palace. After finding out the location of the Heaven Origin Palace, Kang Shinmu went straight to the Heaven Origin Palace. As he moved forward, Kang Shinmu could vaguely sense a strange aura. Moreover, he did not know why, after the 7 devouring demon sealing art's seal lit up, it did not close. Although he had already tried to close it, the 7 devouring demon sealing art seal did not close. At this time, Kang Shinmu had already arrived at a forest area. Looking at the road, the forest should extend endlessly. In short, the area it occupied was very large. There should be some demonic beasts living in it. It was only when Kang Shinmu walked a little closer that he discovered that the trees in this forest were very strange. Not only the trees, but even the flowers and plants growing on the ground were all strangely shaped. They were either 2 branches connected together or several branches joined together. There was also a layer of soil not far away from the forest, mixed with sand. This scene was like two huge jungles merging together. Suddenly, Kang Shinmu quivered. In other words, the forest in front of him was mixed with the forest in the sealed secret realm. Comparing the position of the forest and the sand, Kang Shinmu basically determined the location of the forest in the sealed secret realm. It was the sand that he and Senior Moya had encountered before heading to the river. That piece of sand was originally a forest. Where the sand extended, there were trees. But because of the strange space barrier that constantly appeared under the sand, he did not intend to stay. At that time, because of some things, he left in a hurry and did not have time to check the forest not far from the sand. He did not think that he would encounter that forest again in the outer domain. Although there was still a distance from the forest, Kang Shinmu could still clearly sense the space barrier floating in the air. Just like in the secret realm, it was randomly born from the sand and floated in the air without any pattern. Kang Shinmu's expression suddenly froze. He retracted his soul consciousness and vigilantly turned around. Sure enough, there was a young man standing behind him. It was Wanzong. Previously in the secret realm, Kang Shinmu had met Wanzong several times. Naturally, he still remembered his appearance. Chapter 57-55. Kang Shinmu. Wanzong glanced at Kang Shinmu and spoke slowly. He was dressed as usual, and his body was still stained with some sand, and there was a faint space barrier floating around him. It was not difficult to see that he came from the space layer under the sand. Wanzong's eyes narrowed, and a glimmer of light flashed across his eyes. He understood a little about Kang Shinmu's current situation. Kang Shinmu had seen Wanzong several times. Originally, he only thought that Wanzong was a cultivator from the outer domain, but since Wanzong appeared in Leng Zhanghong's battlefield, he had a new understanding of this person. The two looked at each other. Suddenly, Wanzong moved first. At this moment, Kang Shinmu's Qi Meridian condensed power and responded. The battle between the two of them had begun. Wanzong directly released the supreme divine power of the 9th level as soon as he attacked. It was a kind of supreme divine power that Kang Shinmu had never seen, never touched, and never heard of. He could only barely sense that the other party's supreme divine power had reached the 9th level with his own soul consciousness. Moreover, when Wanzong displayed the supreme divine power of the 9th level, he also released the power of the supreme domain corresponding to the supreme divine power. In a moment, the space in which the two were located changed. When Kang Shinmu and Wanzong fought, he released the supreme power of space. Through the supreme power of space, he found that the space in which he was located at this time was very mysterious, like the space in a secret realm. But unlike the secret realm, the space in which he was located at this time was filled with a strange aura that did not belong to the secret realm. This kind of aura, Kang Shinmu had felt before. It was when the divine light appeared, and when Leng Zhanghong opened the contract gate, he had felt the same aura. The world that the contract gate connected to was the other world, and the aura coming from the space was naturally the aura of the other world. In other words, at this time, they were in the other world. Affected by the power of Wanzong's supreme domain, Kang Shinmu's supreme power of space stagnated, unable to be released, and even felt like it was being swallowed. Kang Shinmu could only retract his supreme spatial energy. His soul consciousness was stronger than his own supreme divine power realm. His soul consciousness barely penetrated the range of Wanzong's supreme domain power. The outside world was indeed not where he was standing just now. He had stayed in the outer realm for a period of time, so he had gained some understanding of the aura circulating in the outer realm. At this moment, the space was filled with various auras. Kang Shinmu's soul consciousness also sensed that Wanzong's supreme domain power wasn't like Leng Zhanghong's or other cultivators, which covered half of the space. Wanzong's supreme domain power didn't cover a large area of space. It was more like a transfer force that could transfer cultivators who were in the supreme domain power to other spaces or even other worlds. Wait a minute. Suddenly, Kang Shinmu sensed that something was wrong with the 7 devouring devil sealing art. The seal of the 7 devouring demons' sealing art, which he had painstakingly shut off, suddenly lit up without any warning. 2 different images were displayed on the black and white mirrors. The black mirror showed the scene that Kang Shinmu's soul consciousness had just perceived. On the other hand, the white mirror showed where he was standing just now, which was the forest in the Outland Realm. Seeing the 2 images, Kang Shinmu suddenly thought that this layer of supreme domain power was like a teleportation array. One side was connected to the original world, and the other was connected to another world. Generally speaking, the creation of supreme domain power depended on the supreme divine power. In the face of such a supreme domain power, Kang Shinmu couldn't think of what kind of supreme divine power could give rise to such a supreme domain power. Bipolar mirror, is it? Not long after the 7 devouring demon sealing art was activated, he heard Wanzong's somewhat surprised voice. Then, he launched another attack. Kang Shinmu was tired of dealing with Wanzong's supreme divine power. Although Kang Shinmu didn't know what kind of supreme divine power Wanzong was using, the 9th level supreme divine power that Wanzong released was enough to suppress Kang Shinmu. Kang Shinmu's supreme divine flame had also reached the 9th level. Even so, the 9th level supreme divine flame was still defeated by Wanzong's 9th level supreme divine power. The supreme divine flame was a new kind of supreme divine power that was refined and devoured after the power of the supreme divine fire merged with the flame of the dead. It was a brand new kind of supreme divine power, and its strength was far from what the power of the supreme divine fire could compare to. The only thing that could compare to the supreme godly flame was the supreme holy ice power. Such a level of supreme divine power was still suppressed by Wanzong's supreme divine power, which meant that Wanzong's supreme divine power was of a higher grade. Even the 9th level supreme divine flame could not deal with the other party's supreme divine power, so Kang Shinmu did not release other supreme divine powers. There were indeed many types of supreme divine powers that he had comprehended, but they were only at the entry level and could not fight with Wanzong. When Kang Shinmu focused his mind, he unintentionally released the supreme soul power. This was a kind of supreme divine power that could not advance until now. From the beginning when he seized the supreme soul power until now, it had remained at the initial level. Along the way, Kang Shinmu had not been able to fully understand the supreme soul power. But he also had a general direction. The advancement of the supreme soul power was mostly like the 7 devouring demons sealing art, which needed to devour the corresponding power. The moment the supreme soul power was released, Wanzong's expression changed, and he looked at Kang Shinmu with a dignified expression. Kang Shinmu did not know that he was controlling the supreme soul power. When he made his move, he suddenly found that his attack worked on Wanzong. Similarly, Wanzong was also surprised by Kang Shinmu's offensive. He was also a little surprised by the supreme divine flame released by Kang Shinmu. It seemed that in just a year, Kang Shinmu had grown to a terrifying realm. However, the 9th level supreme divine flame was still a supreme divine power that had reached the 9th level. Without its own concept, it would never be able to step into the door of the rules. The power that Kang Shinmu released just now, was it the supreme soul power? Wanzong condensed his soul consciousness and swept towards Kang Shinmu. Kang Shinmu controlled the supreme divine flame, wanting to resist Wanzong's offensive. The supreme soul power he released turned into an enchantment, blocking all of Wanzong's offensive. Wanzong's eyes narrowed, and his palm momentum had already arrived in front of Kang Shinmu's face. Kang Shinmu's palm momentum wrapped in the supreme soul power met Wanzong's palm momentum. The moment the two sides collided, a strong explosion broke out, abruptly blowing a gap in Wanzong's supreme domain power. Wanzong could no longer remain calm. "Who the hell are you?" Wanzong narrowed his eyes and asked in a deep voice. "Kang Shinmu." Kang Shinmu did not avoid the topic. Seeing Wanzong's reaction, Kang Shinmu was shocked. He never thought that the supreme soul power could have an impact on the terrifying Wanzong. Chapter 57-56. What Wanzong wanted to ask was naturally not Kang Shinmu's name. This name had long been spread during the battle in the desolate ancient city, and for a period of time after that, it was often mentioned. The supreme soul power that Kang Shin-mu displayed was very strange. The supreme soul power, in essence, was just a kind of supreme divine power. It had never been heard of that supreme divine power could cause damage to the supreme domain power. In fact, the supreme soul power that Kang Shin-mu displayed just now had affected the range of the supreme domain. Kang Shin-mu focused his mind. Like Wan Zong, Kang Shin-mu was also thinking about this problem. This wasn't the first time that the unparalleled soul power was able to harm the unparalleled domain power. He had encountered it a few times before, but he did not care much. But at this time, the supreme soul power had indeed damaged Wanzong's supreme domain power. This was a kind of domain power that even his supreme divine fire domain could not break through, but it was actually broken by the supreme heart soul power, proving that the supreme heart soul power was extraordinary. For a long time, not only had Kang Shin-mu been unable to improve the supreme soul power, but he had also been unable to comprehend the supreme soul power's domain power. Even other supreme divine powers, such as the supreme dark steel power, although they could not completely comprehend the corresponding supreme domain power, they at least comprehended a part of the domain power. However, the supreme soul power was different. He could not even feel the slightest bit of the domain power. From a certain point of view, the strength of the supreme soul power had a certain connection with the cultivator's own soul consciousness. Kang Shin-mu did not believe that with the strength of his soul consciousness at this time, he could not comprehend the supreme soul power's domain power. Now, he had a general direction. The supreme soul power itself and the supreme soul power's domain power were one. Wan Zong glanced at the supreme domain that was broken by the supreme soul power. With a thought, the broken area returned to its original state. The battle between the two did not determine the winner. In terms of the strength of their supreme divine powers, both of them were at the 9th level. Putting aside supreme divine power, in terms of supreme domain power, Kang Shin-mu was far inferior to Wan Zong. Wan Zong's supreme domain power was as high as the supreme divine power realm, and there were also laws within it. Wan Zong realized that Kang Shin-mu's supreme soul power was different from ordinary supreme divine power, so he didn't hold back. Wan Zong casually twirled his fingers, and the momentum in the domain suddenly changed. A murderous intent swept out like a gale. At the same time, Kang Shin-mu unleashed his supreme power of the soul. At the same time, the 7 devouring demon sealing art suddenly lit up and began to revolve. The two different sides of the engraving gradually fused together, and the images of the two worlds gradually disappeared, turning into a strange environment. It was the space within the domain that Kang Shin-mu was currently in. When this scene appeared in the engraving, the 7 devouring demon sealing art suddenly activated. Some time ago, the 7 devouring demon sealing art had devoured a lot of laws and entered the 2nd level. Although it was not stable, its power had increased. At present, the power of the 7 devouring demon sealing art that Kang Shin-mu had mastered was a kind of auxiliary power. Under the effect of the 7 devouring demon sealing art, the devouring power suddenly swept out and quickly enveloped Kang Shin-mu, and then spread out along with the supreme power of the soul. Wan Zong's supreme domain power had already erupted. Although Kang Shin-mu's supreme power of the soul spread relatively slowly, and was even suppressed by the other party's domain power, it was forced to be unable to spread. The more condensed the domain power, the stronger the laws within it. The devouring power under the effect of the 7 devouring demon sealing art rushed out of the scope of the supreme power of the soul and dispersed. Wan Zong noticed the spread of the devouring power, but he didn't take it seriously. How could a mere devouring power break through his domain power? When the devouring power spread, it began to devour the laws within the domain. The devouring speed was very fast, so fast that by the time Wan Zong noticed it, more than half of it had been devoured. Although the laws within the domain would be devoured by the devouring power, Wan Zong's cultivation realm was, after all, stronger than Kang Shin-mu. Soon, he suppressed Kang Shin-mu. The devouring power under the effect of the 7 devouring demon sealing art could not devour the domain power after devouring the laws within. Wan Zong's power suddenly surged towards Kang Shinmu. Kang Shinmu had long noticed that the devouring power could not devour the domain power, so he restrained the devouring power. In the face of Wan Zong's power, Kang Shinmu could only rely on the engraving power of the 10-directional devil seal. Although the 10-directional devil seal was a heaven and earth sacred item, Kang Shinmu was not sure whether the engraving power of the 10-directional devil seal could compete with Wan Zong. Just as Kang Shinmu activated the 10-directional devil seal, the various powers that existed in the 10-directional devil seal gradually leaked out. The Supreme Heart Soul power, which was originally controlled by Wan Zong's domain power, seemed to have sensed some kind of power and suddenly moved. At this moment, Kang Shinmu sensed the existence of the Supreme Heart Soul power that was different from the Supreme Divine power. The feeling of being filled with the domain was clearly the power of the Supreme Domain. It seemed that the Supreme Heart Soul power was also the domain power of the Supreme Heart Soul power at the same time. At this moment, the Supreme Heart Soul power had already changed greatly. The moment it expanded, the entire space seemed to be dyed with a layer of blood. It quickly spread out and forced back the killing intent that existed in Wan Zong's domain power. When the Supreme Heart Soul power, which had changed, spread out, Wan Zong had already controlled the power of the Supreme Domain in an attempt to trap it. However, no matter how hard he tried, he could not control the Supreme Heart Soul power again. It was clear that all of Kang Shinmu's powers were below his, and even this Supreme Heart Soul power realm was very weak. However, at this moment, it was this inconspicuous Supreme Heart Soul power that directly forced back the domain power and even broke the domain power. After the blood qi dispersed, the two returned to the front of the forest. The moment the domain power was broken, Wan Zong restrained his own power. Although Kang Shinmu did not restrain his own power, he also restrained his gestures. Wan Zong once again looked at Kang Shinmu and smiled meaningfully. Dragon God Clan? From the moment Kang Shinmu activated the 10-directional devil seal, Wan Zong noticed Kang Shinmu. Kang Shinmu had the shadow of that person. No wonder Kang Shinmu would come to the outer territory. The left protector of the United Alliance is on good terms with the Everlasting Pavilion, especially Nangong Jie. Nangong Dujie, a member of the Nangong family who is currently a guest of the Everlasting Pavilion, is an upright person. Wan Zong glanced at Kang Shinmu and said lightly, "Why are you telling me this?" Kang Shinmu concentrated and said in a deep voice, "It's very simple. The left protector and I don't like each other." Wan Zong did not hide anything and smiled playfully. Chapter 57-57. If what Wan Zong said at the beginning was that the two left protectors didn't like each other, then the meaning of the latter words was a bit unpredictable. The master of the Tianyuan Palace Master and Feng were best friends, so there was nothing wrong with what he said. However, thinking about it, whether these two were best friends or not, it had nothing to do with Kang Shinmu. Wan Zong took a deep look at Kang Shinmu, and his figure suddenly disappeared. The moment his figure disappeared, Kang Shinmu once again sensed the power of Wan Zong's supreme realm. Although he had fought with Wan Zong, until now, Kang Shinmu still couldn't detect what kind of power Wan Zong used. His supreme domain power was even more mysterious and unfathomable, difficult to distinguish. Wan Zong had already left, and Kang Shinmu didn't restrain his power. Looking at the jungle in front of him, Kang Shinmu released the power of the Supreme Soul. For a moment, the power of the Supreme Soul suddenly swept out. When he used the power of the Supreme Soul to attack just now, it was blood-red in color. At this time, Kang Shinmu released a large area of the power of the Supreme Soul, which was red. From the outside, a red light suddenly appeared from the edge of the jungle, and then spread toward the jungle with the momentum of a gust of wind. As Kang Shinmu guessed, there were still various kinds of space barriers floating above the jungle. However, it was worth noting that most of these space barriers floated in the space layer above the sand. They didn't spread to the sky above the jungle. In other words, the space barriers in the sealed secret realm hadn't invaded the space layer of the foreign domain for the time being. This was just a temporary discovery by Kang Shinmu. As for whether it would invade later, it was still unknown. After sensing the active range of the space barriers, Kang Shinmu avoided the space barriers and passed through the jungle. While passing through the jungle, Kang Shinmu also sensed the aura of many monsters, as well as some miscellaneous auras. At the same time, he discovered the abnormality of the power of the Supreme Soul. The use of Supreme Soul power had always been the same as soul consciousness. After the battle with Wanzong just now, Kang Shinmu realized the uniqueness of the Supreme Soul power. At this moment, the uniqueness displayed by the Supreme Soul power was even more intense. The peerless power of the soul could actually penetrate through the barriers of space. What kind of existence was a spatial barrier? To put it simply, it was equivalent to a spatial barrier. If one were to enter it, one would be trapped within it. As long as one could find another spatial barrier that connected to the outside world, one would be able to escape. On a deeper level, the spatial barrier was a kind of mystic realm. The combination of several spatial barriers was not as simple as a large-scale secret realm. Instead, the layers of space overlapped with each other. Once one entered one of them by mistake, it was possible that one would be lost forever. However, the peerless power of the soul did not seem to fear this, and directly pierced through the spatial barrier. When he realized this, Kang Shinmu couldn't help but pay more attention to the supreme power of the soul. The supreme power of the soul was the power that he had devoured. All along, he had known that the supreme power of the soul could condense a barrier. It was the first time that he had seen the supreme power of the soul act like a spatial power, passing through the spatial barrier at will. Kang Shinmu trusted the supreme power of the soul a lot, thinking that he could rely on the supreme power of the soul to smoothly avoid all the spatial barriers. However, he did not expect that he would soon be in the spatial barrier. Moreover, he personally felt that the supreme power of the soul had brought him through the layers of spatial barriers, and without any effort, he came to the other end of the forest. Kang Shinmu turned his head to look at the forest. Those spatial barriers were still there. The scarlet light was dissipating. Kang Shinmu condensed the supreme power of the soul. In the palm of his hand, the scarlet halo made him puzzled. Why did he feel that the supreme power of the soul was a little different from before? Carefully thinking about his experience during this period of time, it seemed that he did not encounter anything strange. A year ago, he went into seclusion. In a year's time, other than the supreme divine flame reaching the 9th level, his other supreme divine powers had more or less improved a little. At the same time, he also learned of a drawback of his current cultivation. Only when the supreme divine power that he comprehended reached the 9th level could he step into the door of the rules. Apart from that, there was nothing unusual. During that period of time, he also released the supreme power of the soul, and there was nothing unusual. Suddenly, Kang Shinmu thought of the scene when the sealed secret realm collapsed. At that time, there seemed to be an abnormally cold aura that flew out from the secret realm, and that aura entered the 7 devouring demons' sealing art. Speaking of which, before that energy was absorbed by the 7 devouring demons' sealing art, the engraving was white when it lit up. After absorbing that strange energy, the engraving was black when it lit up. Until now, the engraving was black and white, which was the so-called bipolar mirror. Could it have been affected by this energy, causing the supreme power of the soul to change? On the other side of the forest was a very prosperous city. Unlike the city that Kang Shinmu encountered Wuxia in, the entrance of this city was heavily guarded. Not only that, but the words above the city were also very eye-catching. Sun City. At this time, there were 2 queues that were as long as dragons outside the city gates of Sun City. Anyone who wanted to enter Sun City had to go through an inspection. Kang Shinmu had just arrived, so he did not know why this city was being inspected or what it was being inspected for. He was about to go forward and ask when he heard the crowd discussing something. Did you hear? The sealed secret realm collapsed. After the secret realm collapsed, more than half of the cultivators in it fell into our foreign land. I already know about this, and I even met people from the other side. Speaking of which, it's my first time meeting people from the other side. I feel like the people from the other side are no different from us. The only difference is their cultivation base. I feel like they're very weak. That's nothing. I've seen that senior called Kong Shinmu with my own eyes. Suddenly, a voice rang out from the crowd of people who were in a heated discussion. In an instant, everyone's attention was drawn to it, and they all looked over. Kong Shinmu also looked over curiously. How did he suddenly become a senior? He had to say that the rumors were getting more and more ridiculous as they spread. Senior Kong Shinmu stayed in the neighboring city, and he eventually left the city with a cultivator from the other side. The person who spoke was a middle-aged man with a mustache. As he spoke, he was still keeping people in suspense. Kong Shinmu had never seen this person before, but he could see that the supreme divine power that this person exuded was at least at the 7th level. At this time, many cultivators who were queuing at the city gates had basically reached the 6th level of supreme divine power and above. He could not help but be surprised. There were indeed many experts in the foreign land. As the middle-aged man with the mustache spoke, he glanced at the surrounding crowd and naturally saw Kong Shinmu. What surprised Kong Shinmu was that this person quickly looked away. Chapter 57-58. The queue to enter the city was very long. Kong Shinmu was hesitating whether to continue queuing when he sensed a sharp aura coming from behind him. The sharp aura was heading straight for Kong Shinmu. Kong Shinmu calmed himself down and circulated the supreme divine spirit flame in his meridians. Once the aura approached, he would have to block it. The cultivators who were queuing around Kong Shinmu were also watching intently. The guards at the entrance of Yang City were also looking over. General Duan Tian, who was in charge of guarding Yang City, quickly sensed the strange aura coming towards Yang City. His figure flashed and he dashed out of the city. Who are you? How dare you behave atrociously in Yang City? Duan Tian bellowed. This voice carried with it a strong, unparalleled divine power that spread out in front. General Duan, it's me. As a chuckle sounded, a person dressed in tattered clothes with disheveled hair and a dirty face swept over from the front. Kong Shinmu could tell from the voice and aura that this person was Tang Xiaoyu. However, seeing Tang Xiaoyu's appearance, Kong Shinmu was in disbelief. He could not imagine what Tang Xiaoyu had encountered during this period of time. Duan Tian frowned when he saw this person. Tang Xiaoyu? Tang Xiaoyu was a wanted criminal of Tianyuan Palace. Yang City was a subsidiary city of Tianyuan Palace. His appearance in Yang City at this time was undoubtedly an extremely irrational behavior. You sure have guts. Duan Tian laughed mockingly. Don't laugh too early. Eldest senior brother isn't in Yang City. Tang Xiaoyu shrugged casually. Tang Xiaoyu was right. Eldest senior brother Lien Yi was indeed not in Yang City. Your attire is very unique. Duan Tian sized up Tang Xiaoyu. His eyes were filled with disdain. Put it down. You have a share too. Tang Xiaoyu smiled faintly and then looked at Kong Shinmu, indicating for Kong Shinmu to leave as soon as possible. Not long ago, Tang Xiaoyu encountered people from the Union Alliance. He was no match for them and was beaten up to this extent. Thinking that it wasn't far from Yang City, he planned to use Yang City to block those people from the Allied Alliance. He had never expected to see Kong Shinmu here. Humph. Duan Tian sneered when he heard Tang Xiaoyu's words. Tang Xiaoyu casually patted his body and prepared to enter the city. Don't celebrate too early, Tang Xiaoyu. Although I don't have the authority to capture you, I can inform the people of the Heavenly Origin Palace. Duan Tian sneered and casually glanced at Kong Shinmu before looking in the direction where Tang Xiaoyu was rushing over. That cold and gloomy aura had followed Tang Xiaoyu closely, so it must have something to do with him. Come on, let's enter the city. Tang Xiaoyu came over, not at all trying to hide his current image. He placed a hand on Jiang Shenwu's shoulder. Kang Shenwu did not look down on Tang Xiaoyu. The two of them walked towards Sun City with their arms around each other's shoulders. Brother Jiang, I didn't expect you to come to the outer realm. This is my territory, I'll protect you in the future. Tang Xiaoyu laughed heartily. There were several kinds of complicated Supreme Divine Power auras on his body. These Supreme Divine Power auras were all Supreme Divine Powers that Kang Shenwu had not encountered before. Some of the auras were similar to the Left Protector's aura. Then I'll have to trouble you, Brother Tang. Kang Shenwu smiled. From a certain point of view, he admired Tang Xiaoyu for living a carefree life. At the city gate of Sun City. Before the two of them could enter, they were stopped by a long sword that descended from the sky. The blade of the sword flashed with a cold murderous intent, and the body of the sword flickered with scarlet light. From the sword, it could be seen that the owner of the sword must have experienced countless killings to be able to cultivate the sword to such a level. Soul-slaying sword. Tang Xiaoyu recognized the sword at a glance. You enter the city first. Then, he slapped at Kang Shenwu and pushed Kang Shenwu into the city gate. Just at this moment, a black shadow attacked from the horizon, and a young man in a black robe revealed his figure immediately after. He lifted the soul-slaying sword and stared at Tang Xiaoyu coldly. Tang Xiaoyu, today is the day you die. As soon as the young man finished speaking, he moved and stabbed at Tang Xiaoyu with the soul-slaying sword in his hand. Although Tang Xiaoyu looked like he was in a mess, he was agile and had a ghostly movement technique. The young man could not capture Tang Xiaoyu's movements immediately. Duan Tian came to Sun City after dealing with the other troubles. He Meng, how dare you? Duan Tian glared at the young man in a black robe coldly and shouted. The young man ignored him and kept stabbing at Tang Xiaoyu with the soul-slaying sword. The Sun City gate was in a mess because of He Meng's sudden attack. Hurry up. Duan Tian urged the guards guarding Yang City to hurry up. Kang Shenwu looked at He Meng's aura and sensed the aura that Tang Xiaoyu released. Soon, Kang Shenwu noticed something shocking. He had thought that He Meng's aura was similar to the Left Protector's aura. Now, it seemed like He Meng's aura was completely different from the Left Protector's. He Meng had the Union Alliance's badge on his waist, proving that he was a member of the Union Alliance. Tang Xiaoyu's aura was similar to the Left Protector's. This could only mean that Tang Xiaoyu had fought with the Left Protector before. Judging from He Meng's aggressive and overbearing manner, Tang Xiaoyu must have severely injured the Left Protector. Duan Tian tried to reason with He Meng, but He Meng did not listen and attacked even more ruthlessly. Duan Tian, I've already reported this to the other members of the Union Alliance. You, Sun City, and even Heaven Yuan Palace won't be able to escape, let alone Tang Xiaoyu. He Meng grinned hideously. Is the Union Alliance going to war with Heaven Yuan Palace? Duan Tian asked in a deep voice as he realized the seriousness of the matter. General Duan Tian, is your brain rusty? It's clearly your Heaven Yuan Palace that wants to go to war with the Union Alliance, right? He Meng looked as if he had heard something unbelievable. Duan Tian pursed his lips, guessing that Tang Xiaoyu must have gotten into some trouble. You still don't know what Tang Xiaoyu did? He Meng spoke again when he saw Duan Tian's reaction. Duan Tian's face was filled with confusion. When Kang Shenwu saw He Meng's reaction, he felt that his guess was close to the truth. Hey, He Meng, what I do doesn't seem to have anything to do with Heaven Yuan Palace, right? Everyone in the outer region doesn't know that I'm wanted by Heaven Yuan Palace. Tang Xiaoyu shrugged disapprovingly. Are you in such a hurry to cut ties with Heaven Yuan Palace? Did you regret it when you killed him? Tang Xiaoyu from Tang Village. He Meng's expression was somewhat crazed. He did not want to waste any more words. With a wave of his hand, the soul-exterminating sword emitted a powerful sword aura that shot towards Tang Xiaoyu. You flatter me. Tang Xiaoyu smiled mischievously, then his figure disappeared from the spot. As his figure disappeared, he did not forget to send a voice transmission to Kang Shinmu, telling Kang Shinmu to stay in Yang City as much as possible. Yang City was a subsidiary city of Heaven Yuan Palace. If he stayed in Yang City and the Union Alliance came looking for trouble, at least the people from Heaven Yuan Palace would be there. Tang Xiaoyu from Tang Village? This was the first time Kang Shinmu had heard of such a title. He smiled helplessly, then strode out of Yang City's city gate. When Duan Tian saw Kang Shinmu's actions, he could not help but frown. Just now, Tang Xiaoyu had tried his best to send this person into Yang City, but now he had left the city? He really could not understand what was going on. Tang Xiaoyu, let's see where you can run to today. When Tang Xiaoyu's figure disappeared, He Meng's figure turned, and the soul-exterminating sword stabbed to the side. Chapter 57-59. This idiot. Just as Duan Tian was about to chase after him, he saw that Kang Shinmu had already moved. It was only now that Duan Tian realized Kang Shinmu's terrifying strength. After mastering the supreme power of space, Kang Shinmu could see through Tang Xiaoyu's 10,000 Elephants origin superposition technique and quickly found traces of his movements. Kang Shinmu found Tang Xiaoyu's traces before He Meng and blocked He Meng's palm attack for Tang Xiaoyu. Who are you? He Meng stopped and asked coldly. He Meng sized up Kang Shinmu, but he couldn't figure out Kang Shinmu's cultivation base. However, He Meng was fearless. There were many cultivators who were good at hiding their cultivation base in the outer realm. Generally speaking, supreme cultivators who had reached the 9th level of supreme divine power could hide their own strength at will. Anyone who stopped him from capturing Tang Xiaoyu was an enemy, no matter who they were. As soon as He Meng finished speaking, he released a supreme martial technique and charged straight at Kang Shinmu. Kang Shinmu didn't plan to stand by and do nothing just because He Meng was a member of the United Alliance. Not to mention his friendship with Tang Xiaoyu, from a certain point of view, he would become an enemy of the United Alliance sooner or later. He Meng repeatedly tried to kill Tang Xiaoyu, who was seriously injured. Once Kang Shinmu attacked, he didn't plan to hold back. He released all of his 9th stage supreme divine spirit flames, forcefully blocking He Meng's attack and pushing it back towards He Meng. Tang Xiaoyu originally planned to use the ingenuity of the 10,000 Elephants origin superposition technique to escape with He Meng and Zhou Xian. However, he didn't expect that he underestimated He Meng's strength. He Meng wasn't good at spatial spells. The supreme divine power he cultivated was just like his name, a strength-type supreme divine power. It was this kind of supreme divine power that could pierce through space. Tang Xiaoyu couldn't successfully cast the 10,000 Elephants origin superposition technique. In his current state, if he forced it, it was very likely to cause unbearable consequences. In the face of this crisis, Kang Shinmu stood up. Kang Shinmu's move was beyond Tang Xiaoyu's expectations. The United Alliance was not like the Limitless Pavilion. If they offended the United Alliance, the consequences would be unimaginable. Kang Shinmu was a smart man. He should know the pros and cons of this. Brother Jiang. Tang Xiaoyu appeared in front of Kang Shinmu, intending to stop Kang Shinmu's next wave of attacks. It's too late. Kang Shinmu said lightly. With that, he withdrew his hand gesture. Fortunately, he stopped in time. Tang Xiaoyu heaved a sigh of relief. In the next moment, Tang Xiaoyu was stunned. He Meng, who was knocked out by Kang Shinmu, was no longer breathing. The supreme divine power around his body had completely leaked out, and his vitality had completely disappeared. Tang Xiaoyu glanced at He Meng, then at Kang Shinmu. He was at a loss for words, and his emotions were complicated. The fact that Kang Shinmu could kill He Meng with ease meant that his strength had improved a lot during this period. However, the person who was killed by Kang Shinmu was He Meng. He was a member of the Union Alliance. The Union Alliance had always been vengeful. This was not a good thing. Even if He Meng was from the Everlasting Pavilion, it would not be a big problem. Brother Jiang, over here. Tang Xiaoyu pointed at Yang's city in a hurry. It was not an exaggeration to say that in the entire outer region, the only people who could help Kang Xinmu were the Heavenly Origin Palace and the 10 people. Kang Xinmu had planned to go to the Heavenly Origin Palace, but now that he had provoked the people of the Union Alliance, he could not help but worry. Duan Tian's attention was focused on Kang Xinmu. The scene that had just happened replayed in his mind, and he still could not come back to his senses. From the moment he saw Kang Xinmu, Duan Tian could not clearly see Kang Xinmu's cultivation level. He could roughly guess that Kang Xinmu was not someone to be trifled with. However, he did not expect that he could kill He Meng in an instant. Who did not know He Meng's strength? Who on earth was Kang Xinmu? When did such a powerhouse appear in the outer region? Suddenly, Duan Tian thought of the sealed secret realm. Some time ago, because of the collapse of the sealed secret realm, many cultivators from the secret realm came to the outer region. For now, most of the cultivators who came from the sealed arcane realm came from the other world. In the outer region, the other realm was not an unfamiliar world. It was related to the earliest history of the outer region. Duan Tian saw that Kang Xinmu, whether it was his cultivation level or his bearing, was very similar to a member of a certain clan in the other realm. He was sure that Kang Xinmu was a person from the other realm. Just now, Kang Xinmu had killed someone from the United Alliance. The Heaven Origin Palace had always been at odds with the United Alliance, so they could be considered allies. My dear friend, please come in. Duan Tian took the initiative to invite Kang Xinmu in. Kang Xinmu originally wanted to enter the city, but he hesitated because of the United Alliance. Let's go. I'll show you the customs of the Heaven Origin Palace. Tang Xiaoyu laughed heartily. Kang Xinmu was not a pretentious person. Through Tang Xiaoyu, he had a general understanding of the relationship between the United Alliance and the Heaven Origin Palace, so he did not refuse and entered Sun City. The turmoil outside Sun City was finally over. Patrolling troops could often be seen in Sun City. Moreover, members of the United Alliance were prohibited from entering Sun City. The reason they had to be checked when entering the city was to resist the United Alliance. Not long before the sealed mystic realm collapsed, the United Alliance and the Heaven Origin Palace had a conflict. At that time, the Heaven Origin Palace disciples were out on a mission and encountered members of the United Alliance. The United Alliance people maliciously stirred up trouble, and a fight broke out between the two sides. The United Alliance people used their geographical advantage and called for a few deacon elders. As a result of the fight, many Heaven Origin Palace disciples were seriously injured. One person's cultivation base was crippled, and he would never be able to comprehend supreme divine power for the rest of his life. Another 2 people died. After this incident, the Heaven Origin Palace did not treat the United Alliance with the slightest courtesy. The relationship between the two sides went from being on opposite sides to being completely hostile. Sun City was not the only city affiliated to the Heaven Origin Palace, but the city lords of the other cities actually sided with the United Alliance after this incident. Heaven Origin Palace only found out that the city lords of those cities had secretly joined the United Alliance. In the end, Sun City was the only one left of the several affiliated cities. However, Sun City was not the only city that banned the people of the United Alliance. There was also a city thousands of miles away that followed Sun City and also banned the United Alliance. It was Upper Prefecture City. Upper Prefecture City was a name that had been changed in the past 100 years. The city lord was Xian Che. Xian Che had left to travel a long time ago and had yet to return. However, the rules of Upper Prefecture City were set according to Sun City. According to the general who guarded the city, the ban on the United Alliance was personally imposed by the city lord. Tang Xiaoyu, how dare you come to Sun City? Duan Tian glanced at Tang Xiaoyu and raised his eyebrows. Also, how did you provoke that He Meng? First of all, it was the left protector who provoked the Heaven Origin Palace disciple first. That's why I attacked. Tang Xiaoyu, who was always smiling, looked terrifyingly gloomy when he mentioned this incident. Who? Duan Tian glanced at Tang Xiaoyu's expression and asked. Wan Genjiu. Tang Xiaoyu said in annoyance. Wan Genjiu's cultivation base had been crippled previously. Now that he had finally recovered and his cultivation base was gradually recovering, he still could not comprehend supreme divine power. His soul, consciousness, and sea of consciousness were destroyed. Not only could he not comprehend the supreme divine power that he had previously mastered, he could not comprehend new supreme divine powers in the future either. The left protector had no intention of showing mercy to such a cripple. Duan Tian knew about Wan Genjiu's situation and understood why Tang Xiaoyu would do that. Tang Xiaoyu was not the only one. Anyone else would have done the same. The left protector had only himself to blame for ending up in such a state. Forget it, let's not talk about this anymore. Tang Xiaoyu did not want the atmosphere to be too heavy. I've saved him. His life is not in danger. Kang Xinmu seemed to have an impression of Wan Genjiu when he heard them talking about him. He seemed to have met this person when he went out to train in the past. However, it had been too long and he could not remember it clearly. Yang City was very strict. If anyone was found to have entered the city without reporting, they would be punished. General Duan Tian had already announced that no one from the United Alliance or anyone related to the United Alliance would be allowed to enter Sun City. Chapter 5760. What happened outside Yang City had already spread to Tianyuan Palace. The name Kang Xinmu was no stranger to Tianyuan Palace. Everyone in Tianyuan Palace knew that the wanted man, Tang Xiaoyu, was close to Kang Xinmu. In addition, Kang Xinmu's deeds in the mystic realm had spread, causing Kang Xinmu's name to spread in Tianyuan Palace. Kang Xinmu's origins had become a hot topic of discussion. Of course, that was all there was to it. It wasn't just the Heaven Yuan Palace. Jiang Xinwu's name had become a hot topic for the other sects in the outer domain, such as the Shaoyan sect, the Qing sect, and even the Everlasting Pavilion. However, for Everlasting Pavilion, the atmosphere in the entire sect was somewhat heavy upon hearing the name Kang Xinmu. No one in Everlasting Pavilion had expected that only a few people who had gone to the sealed mystic realm to search for the star map lock would return. The Pavilion Master's daughter did not return, the outstanding disciple Hai Fan did not return, and Everlasting Pavilion's eldest senior brother Dan Yuanfei did not return. Many elders and disciples remained in the sealed mystic realm forever. The culprit behind this tragedy was Kang Xinmu. The place where Kang Xinmu first appeared was at the foot of Everlasting Pavilion's mountain gate. Nangong Yi had also met Kang Xinmu, but the disciples who had gone to Everlasting Pavilion had not returned, so he did not know the details. As the disciples who had gone out to train returned one after another, all the evil deeds that Jiang Xinwu had done were all exposed. Nangong Yi's first reaction when he heard this was disbelief. He had seen Kang Xinmu before, and judging from his appearance, he was not a heinous villain. Why would he do such a thing? Regardless of what Nangong Yi thought, Everlasting Pavilion quickly issued a kill order. Summon all the talented people in the outer realms to hunt down Jiang Xinwu. Regardless of whether he was dead or alive, if he was alive, they wanted to see him. If he was dead, they wanted to see his corpse. As long as Jiang Xinwu was brought to the Everlasting Pavilion, it would be fine. Other than the currency of the outer realm, there was also a large amount of cultivation techniques and elixirs of various attributes that were useful for cultivation. Those who provided clues about Kang Xinmu's whereabouts would also receive a large number of cultivation technique manuals. Even the disciples of the Everlasting Pavilion were envious of these rewards. When the bounty was announced, a large number of disciples of the Everlasting Pavilion left the mountain gate with their magical treasures. They were determined to capture Kang Xinmu. The person Kang Xinmu killed was the youngest daughter of the Everlasting Pavilion's Pavilion Master. He did not take the Everlasting Pavilion's Pavilion Master seriously at all. No one knew how Kang Xinmu could compete with the Wuxia Pavilion, but the Pavilion Master swore that he would make Kang Xinmu pay the price. The Everlasting Pavilion was one of the members of the United Alliance. After this incident, the United Alliance was prepared to intervene. Previously, the news that Kang Shinmu was in Yang City had also been spread to the Wuji Pavilion. Yang City was a subsidiary city of the Heaven Origin Palace. Kang Shinmu's intention was obvious. He wanted to rely on the Heaven Origin Palace. Or perhaps, he was a member of the Heaven Origin Palace. The Everlasting Pavilion had always been unhappy with the Heaven Origin Palace. This time, it was a good opportunity to teach the Heaven Origin Palace a lesson. Of all times, the news came. The Heaven Origin Palace's Tang Xiaoyu killed the United Alliance's left protector. He Meng, who went to seek justice for the left protector, was killed by Kang Shinmu at the city gate of Yang City. This news directly expanded the conflict between the Heaven Origin Palace and the Everlasting Pavilion, and even the United Alliance. The United Alliance had already sent the news to the base and was waiting for the orders from the higher-ups. The Everlasting Pavilion in the Outer Realm had already sent people over. Yang City. Duan Tian had received news from the Upper State City that the members of the Outer Realm's United Alliance were ready to go to war and had already deployed their troops. As the great general of Yang City, Duan Tian was obliged to lead the troops to defend the city. Duan Tian, I seem to have implicated you this time. Tang Xiaoyu had a rare serious look on his face. His tone was not like before, but very solemn. You are the person the palace master ordered to capture. Even if you have committed a heinous crime, you are still a member of the Heaven Origin Palace. Duan Tian punched Tang Xiaoyu and left in a hurry. It was not only Duan Tian who was not used to Tang Xiaoyu being like this, but Kang Shinmu was also not used to it. Ever since he knew Tang Xiaoyu, he had never seen this guy pass by. He suddenly became serious and looked a little strange. Duan Tian, if you die, I will definitely go to your grave to burn incense. Tang Xiaoyu looked at Duan Tian's back and suddenly shouted. I have to thank you. Duan Tian staggered. Tang Xiaoyu knew about the Everlasting Pavilion situation. He took the risk to return to the Heaven Origin Palace, looking for traces of Kang Shinmu along the way. He directly led him to the Heaven Origin Palace. Brother Jiang, do you know about the bipolar mirror? Suddenly, Tang Xiaoyu said in a low voice. Kang Shinmu's expression froze. Could it be that Tang Xiaoyu was also from the other world? He did have the bipolar mirror, but he could not open the passage to the other world. There must be some conditions. The bipolar mirror can open the door to the other world. If you have this thing, you can directly leave the outer region. Tang Xiaoyu said quickly. Right, it can be used together with the Star Atlas lock. As he spoke, Tang Xiaoyu slapped his forehead. I almost forgot. The Star Atlas lock can not only store other people, but also the owner. Because the Star Atlas lock itself is a spatial Dharma artifact that can store life. Tang Xiaoyu's words could be considered to have enlightened Kang Shinmu. Kang Shinmu also understood what he meant. But the current situation was far from that serious. Don't worry. Kang Shinmu patted Tang Xiaoyu's shoulder. I just came to ask something. I will leave the Heaven Origin Palace very soon. Brother Jiang, you are wrong. Tang Xiaoyu's expression was solemn. The United Alliance has been targeting the Heaven Origin Palace for a long time. This time, they just found a so-called excuse. The four sects are not as harmonious as the rumors say. They are all competitors. There is no real friendship. Tang Xiaoyu hesitated for a moment. Then, as if he had made up his mind, he slowly said. If necessary, you can find the Tang village's martial artist, Old Shen. Tang village's Old Shen? Compared to the Tang village's Old Shen, Kang Shinmu was more concerned about what Tang Xiaoyu had said. In fact, not only the sects, but even the cultivators were also in a relationship of competition. Since it was a relationship of competition, then there would be no real friendship. But just now, Tang Xiaoyu had clearly mentioned the Tang village's Old Shen. He would remember this friendship. This is a keepsake. Tang Xiaoyu searched in his pocket and took out a green crescent jade pendant. The jade pendant was engraved with the word Tang. Kang Xinmu did not refuse and took the jade pendant. The two of you. At this moment, a young man in a gray robe walked over quickly. He restrained his aura and strode in front of Kang Xinmu and Tang Xiaoyu. This person was a disciple of the Heaven Origin Palace, Lian Zhu, who was related to Lian Yi by blood. Lian Zhu naturally saw Tang Xiaoyu and couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Tang Xiaoyu, how dare you appear here? Why wouldn't I dare? Tang Xiaoyu curled his lips. What are you doing here? I am under the orders of the palace master to invite you to the Heaven Origin Palace. Lian Zhu's eyes turned and fell on Kang Xinmu. He said politely. Young master, the palace master invites you. Chapter 5761. Yes. Kang Xinmu didn't refuse. Although he felt that Wanzong's words were strange, he couldn't help but remember what Wanzong had said. He said that the master of the Tianyuan Palace was best friends with Feng. Of course, there was also the matter of the ancestors of the dragon gods. Tang Xiaoyu also returned to the Tianyuan Palace. In terms of strength, Lian Zhu and Tang Xiaoyu were on par. Whether they could catch Tang Xiaoyu depended on their attainments in the nature essence superposition technique. The outside world knew that Tang Xiaoyu was ignorant and incompetent. His comprehension of his sex manifestation origin stacking technique was a complete mess. Only those who had fought with Tang Xiaoyu knew that his nature essence superposition technique was very strong. Moreover, his manifestation origin stacking technique allowed him to adapt to the situation and deal with all kinds of situations calmly. It was not limited to a single spell technique. Now that Tang Xiaoyu had appeared in the Tianyuan Palace, the disciples were no longer surprised. Lian Yi had gone out and hadn't returned yet. Lian Zhu had temporarily replaced Lian Yi's position and was in charge of some trivial matters in the Tianyuan Palace. Currently, there were people from other sects visiting the Tianyuan Palace. They were from the Shaoyun sect, the Qing sect, and the Wuji Pavilion. It was because of the crack that had suddenly appeared in the world boundary. The elders speculated that it was because the secret realm had suddenly collapsed, causing a crack to appear in the southern part of the outer region. The crack was relatively close to the cities under the jurisdiction of the Tianyuan Palace and Shangzhou City. Thus, Shangzhou City had also sent people over. It had happened so suddenly that the elders had arranged a meeting. The crack was still small, not enough for one person to pass through. But the aura of the spatial storm from the crack was getting stronger and stronger. Moreover, it was clearly mixed with the aura of the other world. That included the aura of the other world. The other world's foundation was very terrifying. The outer region, even the Feng region, couldn't underestimate the other world. The first person to discover the crack was Elder Nangong Fengyu of the Wuji Pavilion. She had discovered it by chance on the way back to the Wuji Pavilion with Nangong Yi. The two of them temporarily cast a spell to seal the crack, but it was only a temporary seal. There were still spatial storms blowing out from it. Fortunately, the terrain was more remote, so no one would be sucked in. But this wasn't a long-term solution. The strength of the spatial storm was not something an ordinary supreme cultivator could withstand. In addition, that crack seemed to be expanding. Given time, it would sooner or later affect Upper Continent City, and even the entire Heavenly Origin Palace's subsidiary cities. In the end, it would affect the entire outer realm. Hence, Nangong Fengyu came to the Heavenly Yuan Palace to discuss how to resolve this matter. Tang Xiaoyu did not expect Heavenly Yuan Palace to be so lively. He directly asked Lian Zhu to bring Kang Xinmu to find the palace lord or arrange a place for him to stay. Tang Xiaoyu? How dare you come back? On the way, the three of them were stopped. They were from other sections. I am a disciple of Heavenly Yuan Palace. If I don't come here, where should I go? Tang Xiaoyu raised his eyebrows as he casually swept his gaze over the guests in front of him. Not far away, the great elders finished their discussion. As for the matter of the crack in the boundary of the world, they were prepared to work together to repair it. The general of Shangzhou City had already contacted the city lord. It was time for the elders to return and prepare for the repairs. Kang Xinmu. From afar, Elder Nangong Fengyu of the Everlasting Pavilion saw Kang Xinmu and shouted coldly. Not long ago, he had received a summons. He originally planned to capture Kang Xinmu after the meeting, but he did not expect to see Kang Xinmu here. It was truly unexpected. Nangong Fengyu's figure flashed and appeared beside Kang Xinmu. Elder Nangong. Tang Xiaoyu shouted loudly. Not only did his shout not stop Nangong Fengyu, but he was also stopped by Nangong Fengyu's words. Who do you think you are? The dignified Elder Nangong of the Everlasting Pavilion is usually like this? Tang Xiaoyu was not afraid of Nangong Fengyu. Wasn't it just because he had the Nangong family behind him? As a hidden family, the Nangong family could not be bothered with these trivial matters. How I do is not up to you to point your finger at me. Nangong Fengyu said as she pointed at Tang Xiaoyu. Tang Xiaoyu, are you crazy? Lian Zhu was clear of Nangong Fengyu's strength. If this attack landed, Tang Xiaoyu would definitely be seriously injured. The crazy one is Nangong Fengyu, right? No wonder that crazy woman is so unreasonable. Even the elders in the family are like this. What kind of disciples can you expect from them? Tang Xiaoyu sneered and did not move at all. He was not afraid of Nangong Fengyu's attack. Elder Nangong, this junior was rude. Lian Zhu respectfully apologized to Nangong Fengyu. Nangong Fengyu retracted her hand this time. Wait for me to take care of that thief, then I will deal with you. Nangong Fengyu's gaze fell on Kang Xinmu once again. That pair of sinister eyes was filled with dense killing intent. It was as if she wanted to tear Kang Xinmu into pieces. Thus, Nangong Fengyu did not hold back when dealing with Kang Xinmu. She immediately released her 9th level divine power. In an instant, a glass-like barrier suddenly spread out and gathered towards Kang Xinmu. Jiang Shenwu could clearly feel the suppression of a cultivation realm suddenly assaulting him. However, this suppression only lasted for a breath's time before it disappeared. Kang Xinmu looked up and saw a white-haired old man dressed in a white robe walking over with his hands behind his back. Elder Nangong. The moment the person spoke, all the suppression released by Nangong Fengyu was dispelled. Greetings, Palace Master. All the Heavenly Yuan Palace disciples bowed in unison. Kang Xinmu also cupped his fists and bowed. Tian Xingyi, do you know who this person is? Nangong Fengyu turned her head and looked at the Heavenly Yuan Palace Master. Her tone was filled with hostility. I heard you call him Kang Xinmu just now. That should be Kang Xinmu, right? Tian Xingyi smiled. That's right. This person's name is Kang Xinmu. Nangong Fengyu raised her eyebrows and said gloomily, he killed several elite disciples of my limitless pavilion and did not even let the pavilion master's daughter off. This person should be executed. Is that true? Tian Xingyi heard this and glanced at Kang Xinmu. At the same time, Kang Xinmu felt an extreme yang energy suddenly sweeping over. This was probably the energy of the Heavenly Yuan Palace Master, Tian Xingyi. Kang Xinmu restrained his aura so that he would not clash with this energy. Tian Xingyi also restrained his aura very quickly. The disciples who went to the sealed secret territory are all eyewitnesses. They can all prove that he killed countless disciples. Nangong Fengyu's face was extremely gloomy. The powerful divine energy that was released from her body was closing in on Kang Xinmu. So, you are targeting Kang Xinmu because of your family? Tian Xingyi stroked his beard and said. Chapter 57-62. Of course not. Tian Xingyi stroked his beard and smiled. Palace Master, please hand him over. Nangong Fengyu's eyes darkened. Not only were there people from Tianyuan Palace, but there were also guests from other sections. Most of them were here because of the abnormal crack that had appeared at the world boundary. They were also influential people from various sections. It was surprising that something like this had happened between Tianyuan Palace and Wuji Pavilion. Of course, they did not know the whole picture and did not comment. They just maintained an objective attitude from afar. Elder Nangong is right. Tian Xingyi nodded. But, suddenly, he changed the topic. This is Tianyuan Palace. Elder Nangong should know the rules of Tianyuan Palace, right? Nangong Fengyu did not want to listen to any reasoning at all. In his opinion, anyone who stopped him from capturing Kong Shinmu was declaring war on Wuji Pavilion. There had already been some friction with Tianyuan Palace because of the alliance. Now that Tian Xingyi had done this, it was very thought-provoking. I know the rules of Tianyuan Palace, but you know that this person is wanted by Wuji Pavilion. Can you give me an explanation? Nangong Fengyu was already circulating his supreme divine power as he spoke. It was as though he would start a fight if there was any disagreement. This was Nangong Fengyu's confidence in Wuji Pavilion. Once they started a war, Wuji Pavilion would not fear Tianyuan Palace at all. This brother is a guest of Tianyuan Palace and he is now in Tianyuan Palace. If you take him away from Tianyuan Palace, how will the world look at Tianyuan Palace? Tian Xingyi said unhurriedly. Then who would dare to come to Tianyuan Palace? Tian Xingyi's words made sense. All the guests of Tianyuan Palace agreed with Tian Xingyi's words. To think that you still know this. Nangong Fengyu sneered coldly. Tianyuan Palace knows that Kong Shinmu is wanted by Wuji Pavilion, but you still insist on protecting him. If this gets out, won't Tianyuan Palace become a place that deliberately protects criminals? Nangong Fengyu's gaze landed on Tang Xiaoyu after she finished speaking. As a wanted criminal of the Heavenly Yuan Palace, not only did Tang Xiaoyu appear to be in good spirits, but he was also safe and sound in the Heavenly Yuan Palace. Is this how your Heavenly Yuan Palace does things? Nangong Fengyu questioned in a clear voice. Elder Nangong, if you want to talk about your Wuji Pavilion, just say it. Why do you keep looking at me? Could it be that I'm a long-lost clansman of your Nangong family? Tang Xiaoyu looked at Nangong Fengyu innocently. If that's the case, then I'll have to trouble Elder Nangong to find a suitable time to pass on the power of the Nangong clan's bloodline. Impudent! Nangong Fengyu shouted coldly. With a wave of his sleeve, a white waterfall swept out and headed straight for Tang Xiaoyu. Elder Nangong, is this how you treat your Nangong family members? If this were to spread out, wouldn't it damage the reputation of your Nangong family? Tang Xiaoyu executed the myriad elephant origin superposition technique and easily dodged Nangong Fengyu's attack. When Tian Xingyi saw this, his murky eyes lit up. After not seeing him for a period of time, this kid's myriad elephant origin superposition technique had become even more exquisite. Kong Shinmu also broke out in cold sweat and was about to make a move. Tang Xiaoyu naturally saw through Kong Shinmu's thoughts. Under such circumstances, Kong Shinmu definitely couldn't make a move. Otherwise, he would only become a laughing stock for Nangong Fengyu. Our Nangong family doesn't have a clansman like you. Nangong Fengyu emphasized coldly. All the clansmen of the Nangong family have the surname Nangong. If I remember correctly, your name is Tang Xiaoyu. Elder Nangong actually remembers this junior's name. I'm really flattered. Tang Xiaoyu said with a mischievous smile. However, there's something this junior has to remind Elder Nangong. Elder Nangong is wrong when you said that all the clansmen of the Nangong family have the surname Nangong. After all, Gu Feng's surname is Gu. Nangong Fengyu's face darkened. Tang Xiaoyu. Tian Xingyi stopped Tang Xiaoyu. Tang Xiaoyu tactfully retreated to the side. Tian Xingyi, do you really want to protect Kong Shinmu? Nangong Fengyu's words were filled with the smell of gunpowder. She wasn't polite at all and directly called Tian Xingyi by his real name. Kang Shinmu is a guest of our heavenly Yuan Palace. During his stay, we definitely won't hand him over to you. Tian Xingyi said firmly. Very well. Nangong Fengyu was so angry that she laughed. She flung her sleeves and strode out of heavenly Yuan Palace. Someone, send Elder Nangong out. Tian Xingyi called out. No need. After Nangong Fengyu left, the guests from the other sects also bid farewell to heavenly Yuan Palace. Tian Xingyi was about to bring Kang Shinmu to the Forbidden Grounds when he was stopped by Tang Xiaoyu. Palace Lord, you can't be muddle-headed. Do I look like that kind of person to you? Tian Xingyi raised his brows. Lian Yi, capture Tang Xiaoyu. Lian Yi had been waiting at the side for a long time. When he heard Tian Xingyi's order, he immediately came over and tied up Tang Xiaoyu. Palace Lord, I've said it many times. I really didn't mean to barge into the Forbidden Grounds. Moreover, there's nothing to take inside. When Tang Xiaoyu opened his mouth, the people from Heavenly Yuan Palace felt a sharp pain in their heads. He was really too talkative. In just a short while, he had already said a lot. Tian Xingyi was annoyed listening to him and couldn't help but frown. Only Lian Yi was expressionless. Eldest senior brother Lian Yi was probably the only person in the entire Heavenly Yuan Palace who could endure Tang Xiaoyu's nagging. Alright, there's no need to tie him up. Tian Xingyi waved his hand helplessly. Then, he ignored Tang Xiaoyu and let him be. Tian Xingyi brought Kang Shinmu into the Forbidden Grounds of Heavenly Yuan Palace. The moment he stepped into the Forbidden Grounds, Kang Shinmu felt a strange feeling coming from the Qi meridians in his body. The most obvious feeling came from the engraving of the 7 devouring demons sealing art. Ever since he absorbed the power from the explosion of Fang's secret realm, the engraving of the 7 devouring demon sealing art had completely transformed into 2 forms, yin and yang, which was the bipolar mirror. At this moment, the bipolar mirror opened automatically. The power in the Qi meridians moved on its own, attacking the consciousness of his soul. The consciousness of his soul that had always been calm also started to churn. With the churning of the consciousness of his soul, Kang Shinmu felt that his soul and consciousness were gradually becoming stronger. What kind of power was in this forbidden ground? Kang Shinmu couldn't help but be curious. He had heard Tang Xiaoyu mention the ancestors of the dragon gods before. He didn't know if it was because of the ancestors' power that caused his power to react like this. But thinking about it, the abnormality in the Qi meridians should correspond to the power of the ancestors. Then what about the engraving of the 7 devouring demons sealing art? Could there still be remnants of Feng's power here? Kang Shinmu, you are a member of the dragon gods, right? Chapter 57-63. Kang Shinmu hesitated as he looked at the misty passageway. This was his first official visit to the Heavenly Yuan Palace. How did he get brought to the forbidden area? Senior, I am a member of the Dragon God clan. My name is Kang Shinmu, Kang Shinmu answered honestly. Please come in. Tian Xingyi smiled and gestured for Kang Shinmu to enter the passageway. As if he knew Kang Shinmu's concerns, Tian Xingyi smiled. Little friend, do I look like an unreasonable person to you? Kang Shinmu bowed. He knew this, but he was confused. He had just arrived at the Heavenly Yuan Palace. Why was he invited to the forbidden area? Big senior brother, just let me take a look around. Behind him, Tang Xiaoyu's resentful voice came. Immediately, Tang Xiaoyu's figure appeared. After a breath's time, Lian Yi's figure appeared. Tang Xiaoyu. How many times have I told you? You have to cultivate the 10,000 elephants origin folding technique. Don't skip levels. Lian Yi emphasized. Anyone who understood the manifestation origin superimposition technique would be able to tell at a glance how Tang Xiaoyu used the manifestation origin superimposition technique. This guy obviously did not cultivate according to the conventional method. This method allowed one to improve quickly, but it also had serious drawbacks. There was a high chance that it would backfire. Right now, his realm was still low, so he might not notice anything. When his cultivation was higher, he would know the drawbacks. Big senior brother, I understand. I will change next time. Tang Xiaoyu came to the entrance of the passageway. With just a glance, he knew the route. He told Kang Shinmu the route in detail. He also told Kang Shinmu where he could meet the ancestor of the Dragon God clan. Tian Xingyi and Lian Yi were dumbfounded by what they saw. Brother Jiang, don't worry and go in. If there is any danger, please call me. The palace master will not leave you in the lurch. Thank you. Kang Shinmu thanked him and stepped into the passageway. As soon as they entered, the gate of the Forbidden Land closed. Young Master Jiang, don't worry. If you are in danger in Heavenly Yuan Palace, it will definitely be because of Tang Xiaoyu. Kang Shinmu hadn't even taken a few steps when he heard Lian Yi's voice coming from behind him. He couldn't help but laugh. Eldest senior brother, I didn't do anything just now. What do you mean by that? Tang Xiaoyu's face twitched. After complaining about Lian Yi, Tang Xiaoyu's expression turned serious. Palace Master, eldest senior brother, what do you think about the Everlasting Pavilion and the Alliance? What else is there to consider? Do we even have time to think about it? Tian Xingyi threw down these words and strode away. Lian Yi glanced at Tang Xiaoyu helplessly and followed Tian Xingyi. Palace Master, can we win? This was what Tang Xiaoyu was most concerned about. The disparity in strength is too great. The outcome has been decided. Tian Xingyi let out a long sigh. In the forbidden area. After Kang Shinmu entered the passageway, he followed Tang Xiaoyu's instructions and came to a cave abode. A majestic statue was enshrined in the center of the cave abode. As soon as Kang Shinmu entered, he felt a kind of pressure from his bloodline. He knelt in front of the statue and bowed respectfully. As he bowed, he heard a deep voice. Kang Shinmu instinctively became alert and raised his head. An old man walked out from behind the statue. He was wearing a long robe and holding a bronze jade folding fan. To Kang Shinmu, the person who came was very unfamiliar. But the bronze jade folding fan in the person's hand was very familiar to Kang Shinmu. It was the magical artifact of an ancestor of the Dragon God clan. Junior Kang Shinmu greets ancestor. Kang Shinmu bowed respectfully. Kang Shinmu, right? The old man replied with a smile. I'm not your ancestor. Kang Shinmu was confused. According to Tang Xiaoyu, the person enshrined here was the ancestor of the Dragon God clan. Moreover, the bronze jade folding fan in the person's hand also proved his identity. If he was not an ancestor of the Dragon God clan, where did this bronze jade folding fan come from? I'm sorry, I took this folding fan without permission. The old man seemed to realize what Kang Shinmu cared about, so he said and then handed the bronze jade folding fan to Kang Shinmu. Kang Shinmu hurriedly stepped back. I dare not. I didn't know this folding fan was yours. Now I give it back to you. There's nothing to be afraid of. It was originally yours. The old man said with a smile. Seeing that Kang Shinmu still refused to take the fan, he put the fan in front of the statue. Kang Shinmu looked at the fan and then at the statue. This old man was indeed a little different from the statue. This was the forbidden area of the Tianyuan Palace. Anyone who could appear here must be an elder of the Tianyuan Palace. Kang Shinmu, you don't have to be so formal. The old man smiled kindly. He seemed to have thought of something and said, you're right. He seemed to think of something and said, in a sense, you should call me Martial Uncle. Martial Uncle? Kang Shinmu's first reaction was that this person was the junior of his master, Emperor Shi. However, he had basically seen all of his master's junior, but he had never seen this person. The old man paused and said, my name is Su Guang. Before the old man said his name, Kang Shinmu still thought that this must be the martial uncle that he had never met. Now that he said his name, Kang Shinmu was sure that he had never seen this martial uncle. What? Feng didn't tell you about me? Su Guang saw that Kang Shinmu's face was full of doubt, so he couldn't help but blame him. Feng. Kang Shinmu's heart suddenly froze. This senior Su Guang actually knew Feng? Su Guang saw Kang Shinmu's reaction and knew that he had guessed correctly. He couldn't help but feel a little dissatisfied. Feng gave his power of inheritance to this kid and instructed him to find him. In the end, he didn't even introduce himself to the other party. I'm sorry for my lack of manners. Kang Shinmu's words and actions were humble and courteous. It's not your fault. It's Feng's fault. Su Guang said faintly. You said that when he asked you to be his successor, he should at least tell you about his social circle, right? It shouldn't be so awkward for us to meet, right? Senior, Kang Shinmu didn't know what to say for a moment. From the first time he entered Feng's secret realm, Kang Shinmu had always thought that Feng no longer existed. Because he had already passed away, there was such a thing as the power of inheritance. Now it seemed that things didn't seem to be the case. Feng should still exist somewhere in the world. This senior who called himself Su Guang was the master of the Tianyuan Palace Lord, right? You don't have to be so polite. Su Guang had always been unceremonious. He turned and pointed to the bronze jade folding fan on the stage. I picked that fan up. Senior, call me Martial Uncle. Martial Uncle. Kang Shinmu changed the way he addressed him. But he still felt that something was strange. Chapter 57-64. If you need it, go ahead and get it. Su Guang generously stepped aside, making way for Kang Shinmu. I dare not. Kang Shinmu knew very well that this was the ritual implement of the dragon god's ancestor. How could he bear to take it? You're already here. What's there to be afraid of? Su Guang laughed when he heard this. Then, he pointed a finger in the air. Kang Shinmu's body uncontrollably walked in front of the statue, and the ancient bronze jade folding fan floated up. Kang Shinmu thought for a moment, then took the ancient bronze jade folding fan. A large amount of information surged out from it. It was about the ancestor of the dragon gods. The ancestor of the dragon gods worshipped by the heavenly Yuan Palace was usually called Jiangshu. Jiangshu had traveled outside thousands of years ago. He had been to many worlds, including the other world. He had spent the longest time in the other world. After returning from the other world, he came to the extraterritorial realm. He was accidentally involved in a major war in the extraterritorial realm. To the extraterritorial realm, the war had caused too many losses. Hundreds of powerful sects in the extraterritorial realm were involved. In the end, they did not survive and fell in the long river of history. Unfortunately, Jiang Shu came to the extraterritorial realm just in time for the war. When he arrived, the war was basically over. The entire extraterritorial realm was in chaos. He happened to meet the palace master of the heavenly Yuan Palace, Tian Xingyi. Tian Xingyi, whom he had casually saved, was the disciple of Su Guang, whom he had met once in the other world. Later, Tian Xingyi worshipped Jiang Shu. It could be said that without Jiang Shu, it was uncertain whether the heavenly Yuan Palace could continue to exist. This ancient bronze jade folding fan recorded Jiang Shu's life experiences. Kang Shinmu looked through it briefly. He did not know what the end of Jiang Shu's ancestor was. Jiang Shu's ancestor had left the ancient bronze folding fan in the heavenly Yuan Palace. If one day a member of the dragon gods came to the heavenly Yuan Palace, he would hand it over to the descendant of the dragon gods. Take it. It's what you deserve. Su Guang smiled and turned to sit on the stone table in front of Jiang Shu's statue. Kang Shinmu accepted the bronze jade folding fan. There's nothing else here. You can go now. Su Guang paused for a moment, glanced at the environment, and added, that's right. Of course, if you want to stroll around, you can. In the forbidden area of the heavenly Yuan Palace, there are several kinds of natural forces with supreme divine power. You can see if you can comprehend them. If you can take them away. Su Guang's words made Kang Xinmu feel strange. This was a forbidden area of the Tianyuan Palace, and Su Guang was the master of the Tianyuan Palace's palace lord, Tian Xingyi. Did Tian Xingyi know that Su Guang was openly giving away his sect's supreme divine power, the power of nature? Of course, Kang Xinmu still wanted to try and comprehend the force of nature that existed in the Forbidden Land. Thank you, Senior. Kang Xinmu did not refuse and planned to give it a try. It was rare to have such an opportunity to comprehend the power of nature, so Kang Xinmu naturally would not miss it. Among the several kinds of supreme divine powers that Kang Xinmu had comprehended, only the Supreme Spirit Flame had reached the 9th level. The other supreme divine powers, after experiencing several battles, had more or less improved. Kang Xinmu's cultivation system was affected by the 7 devouring demons sealing mantra, and coupled with the mutation of the Supreme Spirit Flame, Kang Xinmu's supreme divine power could only reach the 9th level, and could not improve further. As long as all the supreme divine powers he comprehended reached the 9th level, the door to the realm of laws would open. Regarding this, Jiang Shenwu had seriously comprehended this before. The so-called comprehension of all the supreme divine powers to the 9th level was perhaps just a kind of condition. The real breakthrough depended on the cultivation of the 7 devouring demons sealing mantra. Originally, the 7 devouring demons sealing mantra could only advance by absorbing the power of laws, but with the appearance of the 7 devouring demons sealing mantra, and the appearance of the bipolar mirror, the advancement of the 7 devouring demons sealing mantra seemed to be related to the cultivator's own supreme divine power. When many kinds of supreme divine powers reached the 9th level, the 7 devouring demons sealing mantra would advance faster. Kang Xinmu's cultivation system itself was a diversified cultivation system. Only by cultivating diversified supreme divine powers could he improve further. Moreover, the current devouring power, combined with the power of the 7 devouring demons sealing mantra, could refine the supreme divine power's force of nature. It could refine part of the supreme divine power's force of nature and transform it into the supreme divine power that one needed. Of course, Kang Xinmu was aware of the limitations of his own cultivation. So far, he only had 2 fragments of the 7 devouring demons sealing mantra, and it was not the complete version. In the future, he would have to find the other fragments of the 7 devouring demons sealing mantra. Go. Su Guang smiled and watched Kang Xinmu's figure disappear into the swirling fog. Then, he turned back and cupped his fists at the statue. He had been waiting here for the sake of giving the ancient bronze jade folding fan to the descendant of the dragon gods. Now, the task was completed. Su Guang stepped forward and walked around this place. Suddenly, he sensed a certain aura and reached out to touch the air. The aura in the air had a familiar feeling. A name suddenly appeared in Su Guang's mind. Feng. It was Feng's power of inheritance. Su Guang's eyes narrowed as he glanced in the direction Kang Xinmu had left. Although he was a descendant of the dragon gods and his aptitude seemed to be good, he was not very clear about his cultivation talent. Did Feng just give her power of inheritance to this descendant of the dragon gods? Kang Xinmu left the place where the ancestors were enshrined and walked along a small path. After walking for a while, he saw several forks in the road. Kang Xinmu wanted to see what was going on at the other end of the road, but the surrounding fog was so thick that he could not see at all. Furthermore, this fog also obstructed one's soul consciousness, making it impossible for one's soul consciousness to check their surroundings as they wished. Kang Xinmu looked again, chose the path on the far right, and walked up it. It did not take long for him to reach the end of the road. In front of him was an endless lake. The surface of the lake was calm and there were no ripples. The lake water was so clear that he could see the scene under it. There was a palace standing in the water. Seeing the palace under the water, Kang Xinmu hesitated. After all, this was the forbidden area of the Tianyuan Palace. As an outsider, Tian Xingyi had given enough face to ancestor Jiang Shu by letting him in. Now, because of Senior Su Guang's words, he really did not care about the rules of the Tianyuan Palace. Kang Xinmu hesitated for a moment, then turned and walked away. Once again, he set foot on the path back. When he walked on this path for the second time, Kang Xinmu found that the fog was not ordinary fog, but a kind of supreme divine power of nature. Chapter 57-65. Kang Xinmu was rather familiar with the power of the supreme mist, but he did not expect that the power of nature gathered here was somewhat different from the power of the supreme mist that he had come into contact with previously. This power of nature was not as aggressive as the power of the supreme mist that he had come into contact with previously. On the contrary, the power of nature in front of him felt very gentle. If he walked past it, or even used his soul consciousness and other powers to examine it, it would not have any offensive power. As he was thinking this, Kang Xinmu suddenly sensed something strange in his soul consciousness. The soul consciousness that returned was mixed with an unfamiliar power that invaded his soul consciousness and sea of consciousness. It was the power of nature of the power of the supreme mist that floated here. Although the power of nature of the power of the supreme mist felt very gentle, it was not gentle at all after invading his soul consciousness. Instead, it wreaked havoc. When Kang Xinmu sensed the abnormality in his soul consciousness, the power of nature of the power of the supreme mist had already invaded his soul consciousness. It surged wantonly and stirred up the sea of consciousness that had always been calm. Jiang Shenwu's soul consciousness and sea of consciousness began to churn. To him, it was as if someone was strangling his soul consciousness, causing him to feel uneasy. However, the churning in his soul consciousness quickly calmed down. More than a year ago, Kang Xinmu had devoured the power of the supreme holy ice domain when the Dharma artifact that Lang Changhong's generals had refined perished in the ancient desolate city. All this while, Kang Xinmu had not had the opportunity to comprehend the power of the supreme holy ice domain that corresponded to the power of the supreme holy ice domain. Or rather, he had not encountered the power of the supreme holy ice domain at all. Ever since he had devoured the power of the supreme holy ice domain, this power had always existed in his soul, consciousness, and sea of consciousness. After a long time, the power of the supreme holy ice domain had basically integrated into his soul consciousness. If there were any other impure energies invading his sea of consciousness, the supreme sacred ice domain would definitely expel them. This time was no exception. As soon as the supreme mist's nature power wreaked havoc in his sea of consciousness, the supreme holy ice domain quickly surrounded this power. However, the supreme sacred ice domain's power did not directly expel this power. Instead, it condensed. Kang Xinmu happened to devour this energy. With the help of the supreme sacred ice domain, the power of nature that invaded his body became his own supreme divine power after devouring it. This meant that Kang Xinmu could directly use the power of the supreme mist. He roughly sensed that the supreme mist's power he had just devoured was only one level. Kang Xinmu looked at the supreme mist's force of nature and did not hesitate to release his devouring power to devour it. He did not intend to devour all the power of nature in the supreme mist's force of nature. He intended to stop as soon as he reached the 5th level of the supreme mist's force of nature. What Jiang Shenwu didn't expect was that after he unleashed his devouring power, not only did he devour all the power of nature of the supreme fog that had gathered in the passageway, but he also devoured the power of nature of the supreme divine power that was drifting in the surroundings. The power of nature of supreme divine power that he devoured was very heterogeneous. On the surface, there was a total of 3 types of supreme divine power. Among them, there was the power of nature from the power of supreme mysterious iron, the power of nature from the power of supreme wind, and the power of supreme sacred land. Compared to the previous 2 types of supreme divine power, the power of supreme sacred land's power of nature was much less concentrated. Even so, after devouring the power of supreme sacred land's power of nature, his power of supreme sacred land's power was enhanced. The power of supreme sacred land barely reached the 6th level. Following closely behind was the Supreme Divine Power and the Supreme Dark Iron Power, which had reached the 7th level. There was also the power of Supreme Wind's force of nature. Kang Shinmu had previously fought with a Supreme Wind's force of Supreme Wind, but he did not devour the Supreme Wind's force of Supreme Wind. Now that he had devoured a large amount of power of Supreme Wind's force of nature, he could only reach the 3rd level after refining it. After gathering the power of Supreme Divine Power, Kang Shinmu retracted his devouring power. If he did not retract his devouring power quickly, it would continue to devour the power of nature of Supreme Divine Power. This was the Heavenly Yuan Palace's forbidden area. Senior Su Guang allowed him to come in and refine the power of Supreme Divine Power, which was already giving face to Ancestor Jiang Shu. He had to be content. Kang Shinmu retracted his devouring power and left the place. He walked according to the way he came, but he did not return to the statue of Ancestor Jiang Shu. He did not even see Senior Su Guang. There was no fog on the road under his feet. On the contrary, his vision was very clear, and he could see far away. Because of this, Kang Shinmu felt that there was something fishy about this matter. Although he had walked a long distance when he came here, the journey was not as long as it was now. Looking at his surroundings, it was brighter than before, but the aura that permeated the air was the same as before. Based on the aura and the surroundings, Kang Shinmu felt that he did not go the wrong way. However, he could not see the end of the road under his feet, which made him a little confused. Could it be some kind of boundary? Or some secret realm? No matter what, Heavenly Yuan Palace was a famous sect in the outer domain. Moreover, the sect had a rich history. It was completely normal for there to be boundary or secret realms in the forbidden area. After Su Guang instructed Kang Shinmu to refine the power of Supreme Divine Power, he left the place where Jiang Shu's statue was. When he appeared again, he was at the entrance of the forbidden area. With Palace Master Tian Xingyi in the lead, Tang Xiaoyu and the other disciples followed closely behind, waiting there. Seeing Su Guang appear, Tian Xingyi immediately went forward. Master. Tian Xingyi did not expect to see his master today, and was a little surprised. Greetings, Grand Master. Tang Xiaoyu and the others respectfully bowed. Su Guang had arrived. Tang Xiaoyu was well behaved, respectfully standing to the side, not daring to raise his head. Seeing this scene, Lian Yi felt helpless. In the entire Heavenly Yuan Palace, the only person who could suppress Tang Xiaoyu was the Palace Master's master, Senior Su Guang. With so many people, Su Guang found Tang Xiaoyu in the crowd with his head lowered, and strode towards Tang Xiaoyu. Hearing the footsteps getting closer and closer, Tang Xiaoyu's heart was filled with bitterness. Su Guang had not been in Heavenly Yuan Palace for hundreds of years. Why did he return today? If he knew that Senior Su was here, he definitely would not have come to the forbidden area. Tang Xiaoyu, find a time to return home. Su Guang said the moment he came over. Why? Tang Xiaoyu asked, puzzled. Do you want to stay in Heavenly Yuan Palace? Su Guang paused, then asked in a low voice. Chapter 5766. Is that true? Su Guang asked Tang Xiaoyu solemnly. Of course. Tang Xiaoyu nodded affirmatively. He added, of course, just don't make me the soul of Tianyuan Palace. As he finished speaking, he shot a glance at Lian Yi, using his eyes to warn him not to act rashly. Lian Yi was helpless about this. He was only following orders. Tang Xiaoyu would have been caught long ago if he had not gone easy on him. Since that's the case, why don't you go home immediately? Su Guang said quickly. Suddenly, he felt that something was wrong and looked at Lian Yi. Lian Yi, I'll have to trouble you to send Tang Xiaoyu home. Yes, Grand Master. Lian Yi accepted the order respectfully. Only Tang Xiaoyu had not processed the situation. He looked at Lian Yi and then at Su Guang, feeling very confused. Grandmaster, why did you expel me from Tianyuan Palace as soon as you returned? Everything has to be reasonable, right? If you don't give me a reasonable explanation, I won't leave even if I act unreasonable and shamelessly. This happened too suddenly. Tang Xiaoyu could not accept it at all. Moreover, if he left, what would happen to Kang Xinmu? Tianyuan Palace was the only place Kang Xinmu could rely on. If he left Tianyuan Palace, Kang Xinmu would be in endless trouble. Do you think I'm that kind of unreasonable person at my age? Su Guang raised an eyebrow and glanced at Lien Yi. Set off as soon as possible. Yes, Grandmaster. Lien Yi took the order and forcefully left Tianyuan Palace with Tang Xiaoyu. Tang Xiaoyu had a high level of attainment in the manifestation essence superimposition technique, but he had been under Lien Yi's supervision since the beginning. Even though he had made many improvements to the manifestation essence superimposition technique, Lien Yi had long figured out Tang Xiaoyu's routine and could easily find where Tang Xiaoyu's manifestation essence superimposition technique was. Only then did Tang Xiaoyu realize that he could not escape Lien Yi's grasp once Lien Yi got serious. Eldest senior brother, why didn't you just take me away? Tang Xiaoyu gave up jumping around and obediently followed Lien Yi. Because Palace Master only told me to follow you, he didn't say anything about capturing you. He said that you would come back sooner or later. Lien Yi said honestly. Eldest senior brother, you guys, Tang Xiaoyu was momentarily speechless. Tang Xiaoyu's home was in Tang Village. In other words, when Tian Xingyi first met Tang Xiaoyu, it was in Tang Village. At that time, Tang Xiaoyu had gotten into some kind of trouble and was being hunted down. Tian Xing had conveniently helped Tang Xiaoyu. In the end, for some unknown reason, he brought Tang Xiaoyu to the Heavenly Origin Palace. The Tang village was located in the north of the Nightmare region, which was relatively remote. Later on, when Tang Xiaoyu went out to train, he also went to the Dun realm, but he didn't go home. In his words, home was too far away, and he might not be able to find the way. This time, Tang Xiaoyu was personally driven out of the sect by Su Guang. Being chased out of Heaven Origin Palace was one thing, but Tang Xiaoyu would definitely not return home. In order to supervise his return home, Su Guang had no choice but to send out his right-hand man, Lien Yi. Eldest senior brother, why did Su Guang, under Lien Yi's friendly gaze, Tang Xiaoyu reluctantly added a sentence. Must senior chase me away? He hasn't returned to the Heavenly Origin Palace for a long time. It's not right to chase me away now that he's back. Do you know about the crack at the boundary of the world? Lien Yi asked after a moment of thought. I do. The crack doesn't just affect the Heavenly Origin Palace, but the entire outer realm. There's no need to worry too much about it. Tang Xiaoyu pursed his lips and said. I knew you would think that. Lien Yi glanced at Tang Xiaoyu, then grabbed him and sped up. Heavenly Origin Palace. Su Guang had sent Tang Xiaoyu back to Tang Village because he had sensed the crack at the boundary of the world. Tang Village, as its name suggested, was an ordinary village. However, the people living in the village were all top-notch almighties. Especially the Tang Village chief, who was an expert of laws. The appearance of the crack at the boundary of the world seemed to affect the entire outer realm, but in fact, the Heavenly Origin Palace was the most affected. Coupled with the Allied Alliance's pincer attack, the Heavenly Origin Palace might be destroyed. The only one who could help the Heavenly Origin Palace was the expert of laws in Tang Village. Su Guang knew about this. Once Tian Xingyi knew, Lien Yi quickly understood as well. Even the other disciples realized the severity of the crack at the boundary of the world. Only Tang Xiaoyu still didn't know anything. I never thought that one day, the survival of the Heavenly Origin Palace would fall on Tang Xiaoyu's shoulders. Tian Xingyi stroked his beard, his tone a little strange. This kid's talent is not bad, but I feel like he's not serious at all, Su Guang said. However, I don't know if Tang Xiaoyu's luck is good, but he actually brought back a descendant of the dragon gods. Tian Xingyi glanced in the direction of the Forbidden Land. The strength of Kang Shinmu's talent had already exceeded his expectations. This kid is about the same as Jiang Shu. Su Guang had already seen Kang Shinmu's ability, and his evaluation was very pertinent. He's also more handsome than Jiang Shu. Master, if Jiang Shu hears what you said, I believe he won't let you off. Tian Xingyi's expression was a little strange. Su Guang glanced outside the Heavenly Origin Palace, where the crack at the boundary of the world was. The people from the United Alliance have already arrived at Sun City. Suddenly, Su Guang said, Master, please stay here and protect Kang Shinmu. I'll go to Sun City, Tian Xingyi said, knowing that this matter could not be neglected. From the looks of it, the United Alliance obviously wants to get rid of the Heavenly Origin Palace. No matter what, don't leave the Heavenly Origin Palace. Su Guang understood the thoughts of the people from the United Alliance too well. They had long had ideas about the Heavenly Origin Palace, and this mission was just to express their thoughts. Su Guang's figure moved, and he left the Heavenly Origin Palace. A voice immediately sounded in Tian Xingyi's ears, Kang Shinmu is the inheritor of the power that my friend has bestowed upon him. You must ensure his safety. After Tian Xingyi received the order, he went to the exit of the Forbidden Land. In the Forbidden Land, Kang Shinmu came to an unfamiliar place. It was the supreme territory power that ancestor Jiang Shu had left behind. Based on what Kang Shinmu had sensed, he did not know the attribute of the supreme territory power, and could only judge that it was a type of supreme territory power. Moreover, he had already unknowingly entered the range of the supreme territory power. The deeper he went into the range of the supreme territory, the more he could feel the existence of the supreme territory power. However, he still could not tell what kind of supreme territory power it was. As he continued to move forward, he felt that his supreme territory power was moving strangely, and it gradually started to circulate. This mysterious supreme territory power resonated with the supreme territory power that Kang Shinmu currently possessed. What kind of supreme territory power was this? Or was this a type of supreme territory power that had no attribute? Chapter 57-67. Kang Shinmu sensed the surrounding supreme territory's power again and confirmed that there were no attributes. He tried to release one of the supreme divine powers, the power of supreme mysterious iron. He had mastered the power of supreme mysterious iron for some time, but he had not comprehended the corresponding supreme territory's power of supreme mysterious iron. The power of supreme mysterious iron spread around Kang Shinmu's body and gradually seeped into the surrounding supreme territory. What happened next caused Jiang Shenwu to be stupefied. Originally, he had not comprehended the power of supreme mysterious iron's power of supreme mysterious iron's power of supreme mysterious iron. However, at this moment, when he unfolded this mysterious unknown territory, he actually unfolded the power of supreme mysterious iron. Moreover, Kang Shinmu could control the power of supreme mysterious iron's power of supreme mysterious iron that suddenly unfolded. As Kang Shinmu's thoughts changed continuously, the power of supreme mysterious iron's power of supreme mysterious iron's power of supreme mysterious iron kept changing. To confirm his guess, Kang Shinmu retracted the power of supreme mysterious iron. The moment he retracted the power of supreme mysterious iron, the power of supreme mysterious iron's power of supreme mysterious iron's power of supreme mysterious iron was also retracted. Kang Shinmu could clearly feel the changes that happened to his power of supreme mysterious iron. After releasing the power of supreme mysterious iron, his power of supreme mysterious iron had unfolded the power of supreme mysterious iron's power of supreme mysterious iron. Then, he released the power of Holy Land. This was a type of holy attribute supreme divine power. Ever since he had devoured it, it had maintained its original level. It was only recently that he had made some progress. Moreover, he could clearly feel that the cultivation of the power of supreme sacred land was much more difficult than ordinary supreme divine power. With such a high difficulty level of supreme divine power, the corresponding power of supreme territory's difficulty would definitely be higher. To Kang Shinmu, although he had not completely comprehended the power of Supreme Mysterious Iron's power of Supreme Mysterious Iron's power of Supreme Territory, there were some signs. To be able to quickly comprehend the power of Supreme Mysterious Iron's power of Supreme Mysterious Iron's power of Supreme Divine Power was considered reasonable. The power of Supreme Holy Land was different. This was a type of Supreme God power that Kang Shinmu had not mastered. He would not even be able to use the power of the Supreme Sacred Land to unleash supreme martial skills, let alone comprehend the corresponding supreme power of the domain. The moment Kang Shinmu released the Supreme Sacred Land's power, the Supreme Sacred Land's power flew over and spread out in this attributeless domain. Then, Kang Shinmu clearly felt something extra in his mind. Information about domain power was gradually produced. This feeling was the domain power of the Supreme Holy Land. Kang Shinmu condensed the power of the Supreme Holy Earth's domain power, controlled the power of the Supreme Holy Earth, and successfully condensed the corresponding supreme martial skill of the Supreme Holy Earth. At this point, Kang Shinmu also understood. The attributeless domain power here could be combined with any supreme divine power, thereby helping the Supreme Divine Power comprehend the corresponding Supreme Territory's power of Supreme Divine Power as soon as possible. He did not expect Tianyuan Palace to have such a magical domain power. It was indeed a large sect with a strong foundation. After discovering that he had entered a domain world, Kang Shinmu used his soul consciousness to size up the scope of this domain world. Even though his soul consciousness was very strong and covered a wide range, he still could not detect the boundary of this domain world. Perhaps it had something to do with the domain world's restrictions on the soul consciousness, which hindered the extension of the soul consciousness. In the domain world, Kang Shinmu had already successfully mastered the power of domain of two supreme divine powers with the help of the power of domain here. He could clearly sense that the domain power of the space he was in had become much weaker. In other words, after comprehending the corresponding Supreme Territory's power of Supreme Divine Power, the Supreme Territory's power of Supreme Territory in this attributeless Supreme Domain world was relatively weaker. Kang Shinmu specially controlled the Supreme Divine Flame and the Supreme Soul Power to release other Supreme Divine Powers one after another. Not long after, all of them comprehended the Supreme Territory's power. The Supreme Divine Flame was the first Supreme Divine Power that Kang Shinmu cultivated to the 9th realm, and there were some changes along the way. As the power of the Supreme Divine Fire mutated, the power of the Supreme Divine Fire domain also changed. In short, it was a Supreme Divine Power with Supreme Territory's power, so there was no need to continue to comprehend it. In that case, it was the Supreme Soul Power's turn next. Originally, Kang Shinmu's understanding of the Supreme Soul Power was a spiritual-type Supreme Divine Power that was related to the soul consciousness. It would definitely be very difficult to comprehend the corresponding Supreme Territory's power. It was not until later that Kang Shinmu met Wanzong, a mysterious expert. In the sealed secret realm, Kang Shinmu met Wanzong in the ancient desolate ancient city, and in a period of experience after that, he also met Wanzong by chance. Kang Shinmu had never dared to underestimate Wanzong's strength. The two of them had noticed each other, but there had never been a collision of power. After the self-sealed secret realm collapsed, Kang Shinmu fell into the foreign realm and met Wanzong again. From that moment on, Kang Shinmu realized how terrifying Wanzong's strength was. The gap between his and Wanzong's cultivation was not just a gap in realm, but a gap in all aspects. At the critical moment, it was the Supreme Soul Power that played a role. Kang Shinmu's understanding of the Supreme Soul Power began to change. It could repel Wanzong's power. It wasn't just the pure power of the soul. However, Kang Shinmu did not have a clear understanding of what this power was. After thinking for a moment, Kang Shinmu released the Supreme Soul Power. After that battle, the appearance of the Supreme Soul Power had also changed to a certain extent and turned red. The Crimson Supreme Soul Power was extremely eye-catching in the invisible domain world. With Kang Shinmu as the center, the Supreme Soul Power spread out in all directions. Kang Shinmu carefully sensed the Supreme Soul Power, only to notice that the red power of the soul circled around the domain world and then returned. After restraining the Supreme Soul Power, Kang Shinmu did not sense any signs of the Supreme Soul Power producing domain world. This was strange. Other Supreme Divine Powers were fine, but why didn't it work when it came to the Supreme Soul Power? With this thought in mind, Kang Shinmu released the Supreme Divine Flame that had reached the 9th level. The moment the 9th level Supreme Divine Flame was released, Kang Shinmu clearly felt the domain world churning. The Supreme Divine Flame itself had already released the Supreme Domain Power. At this time, when it entered the domain world, it seemed to form a resonance with it, and a corresponding Supreme Domain Power was released. Chapter 57-68. As time passed, the domain power of the Supreme Divine Flame had completely occupied the domain world there. At the same time, Kang Shinmu also felt the scope of the entire domain world. It was no exaggeration to say that the domain world was like a brand new world that was above this place. However, there was only domain power in this brand new world. As the Supreme Divine Flame's domain power devoured the power in the domain world, Kang Shinmu felt that his domain power had reached a critical point. Looking at its saturated state, it seemed like it was about to break through. Initially, Kang Shinmu's understanding of the Supreme Domain Power was very limited, and he only regarded it as the corresponding domain power of the Supreme Divine Power. If the Supreme Divine Power broke through, the corresponding domain power of the Supreme Divine Power would also break through. However, it now seemed that the breakthrough point of the Supreme Domain Power did not seem to be gentle with the Supreme Divine Power. The Supreme Domain Power was more inclined to a new kind of power, and had different considerations from the realm of the Supreme Divine Power. What Kang Shinmu was facing at this moment was the breakthrough of the Supreme Divine Flame's domain power. He simply sat on the ground, and devoted himself to the breakthrough of the Supreme Divine Flame's domain power. Feeling the continuous changes of the Supreme Divine Flame's domain power, Kang Shinmu felt the world that existed in his own domain power. Kang Shinmu had a new understanding of the Supreme Divine Power and the domain power of the Supreme Divine Power. Supreme Divine Power was an existence of absolute power, and the corresponding Supreme Domain Power could be understood as a realm of power. This realm was more abstract to understand, so most people used the term domain as a general term. As the Supreme Divine Flame's domain power continued to devour the domain power in this domain world, the Supreme Domain Power corresponding to the Supreme Divine Flame was breaking through and becoming more inclined to domain power. Hence, Kang Shinmu speculated that this was not the case for the Supreme Divine Flame's domain power. After reaching a certain realm, the Supreme Domain Power corresponding to the other Supreme Divine Powers would lean more towards the power of domain. On the surface, the only difference between these two forms of address was the name. However, there was a world of difference in their essence. Supreme Territory Power meant that this power had a corresponding Supreme Divine Power, and it was closely related to Supreme Divine Power. Domain Power was a completely new kind of power. It could even be released independently of Supreme Divine Power. Moreover, when one's domain power reached a certain level, it would become a new world. The world formed by domain power was related to the secret realms that appeared in various places. Of those so-called secret realms, apart from a few that were naturally formed worlds in space, most of the secret realms were man-made. Here, Seal had to be mentioned. The reason why it was called Feng's mystic realm was because this mystic realm was also created by Feng. At this moment, Jiang Shenwu's Supreme Divine Spiritual Flame and its corresponding Supreme Domain Power were undergoing such a transformation. Once the transformation was complete, it would become a brand new domain power. This process lasted for 2 days. In the past 2 days, Kang Shinmu's Supreme Domain Power had been devouring the domain power in the domain world. Hard work paid off, and Kang Shinmu's domain power had completed its transformation. After feeling the brand new domain power, Kang Shinmu clearly sensed that as long as he willed it, this power would be released at will. Unlike the previous Supreme Domain Power that required mastery of Supreme Divine Power, the current domain power could be released on its own. In short, the current domain power was a brand new power that was different from Supreme Divine Power. However, the domain power was transformed from the domain power of supreme divine power, after all, and its essence was also related to supreme divine power. What Kang Shinmu released just now was the supreme divine flame, supreme divine domain. In that case, the domain power that he transformed at this time was the divine domain. The divine domain, as its name suggested, was a kind of domain power of flames. Kang Shinmu just tried to release it, and the domain world he was in was occupied by a sense of heat. "Kid, you're really not polite at all." Suddenly, a voice rang out from behind. Kang Shinmu's heart suddenly froze. "Senior is here, and I actually didn't notice it at all." As soon as he turned around, he saw Su Guang hurriedly walking over with his hands behind his back. "Senior." Kang Shinmu greeted him humbly. "Yes, Uncle Master." Su Guang frowned and emphasized impatiently. "If you weren't my disciple nephew, I wouldn't have bothered to talk to you." "Yes, Uncle Master." Kang Shinmu still changed the way he addressed Lin Li. Of course, the biggest question in his mind now was still the way he addressed Lin Li. Although he had gone to Feng's mystic realm and gained a lot, and his cultivation realm had also broken through, he had never seen Feng from the beginning to the end. However, from the beginning to the end, he had not even seen Feng. He had not even gone through the ceremony of becoming Feng's disciple. He just felt that something was off. He acknowledged Feng as his master, but he didn't know if Feng would acknowledge him as his disciple. "Thank you, Uncle Master." But then again, Su Guang guiding him to this domain world was a kind of recognition for him. "You don't have to thank me. I just promised Jiang Shu that I would give this to the descendants of the dragon gods." Su Guang smiled when he heard this. Kang Shinmu was stunned for a while, but at the same time, he felt very lucky. "That's right. Jiang Shu didn't specifically say that he would give it to you. He only said that it was a descendant of the dragon gods." Su Guang smiled playfully. "Are you very disappointed?" "I dare not." Kang Shinmu was still very self-aware. It was already a great opportunity for ancestor Jiang Shu to leave this domain world. Now that he had encountered it, he could only say that he was lucky. He didn't dare to have any complaints. The divine domain that Kang Shinmu condensed had also exhausted the domain power in this domain world. The domain world disappeared, revealing its original appearance. Only then did Kang Shinmu realize that he was still on the passage out of the forbidden area. "Why? Are you still not satisfied?" Seeing that Kang Shinmu was still standing still, Su Guang raised his eyebrows. He said, "I'm satisfied." Kang Shinmu responded bitterly, then strode to catch up with Su Guang. "By the way, Uncle Master, do you know where my ancestor is now?" When passing by the statue of ancestor Jiang Shu again, Kang Shinmu pondered and asked. He had a vague feeling that ancestor Jiang Shu should be traveling somewhere. "I don't know. Maybe he's dead." Su Guang hesitated for a long time before saying. He didn't seem to want to talk about this topic. After a few words, he urged Kang Shinmu to leave the forbidden area. At the exit of the forbidden area, Tian Xingyi had been waiting for a long time. Junior Kang Shinmu greets the palace master. Kang Shinmu was very grateful to Tian Xingyi. He was the one who gave him the opportunity to enter the forbidden area. He also had a good impression of the entire Tianyuan palace. The overall atmosphere was very good. "That's not necessary." Tian Xingyi smiled when he heard this. Chapter 57-69. Kang Shinmu could not help but have a strange expression. He almost forgot that Senior Su Guang was Tian Xingyi's master, and Feng was his master. In that case, Tian Xingyi was indeed his senior brother. "Let's talk about it later. Things are urgent now. Let's hurry up and leave," Su Guang urged. 2 days ago, Kang Shinmu entered the forbidden area of Tianyuan Palace, and then entered the domain world. He knew nothing about what happened in the outside world. In just 2 days, Tianyuan Palace was taken out of the 4 major sects by the Wuji Pavilion. Not only that, the Wuji Pavilion officially declared war on Tianyuan Palace. The branch of the United Alliance in the outer region also issued an order. Although they did not explicitly say that they were going to attack Tianyuan Palace, they had already attacked the disciples of Tianyuan Palace. In 2 days' time, all the people or forces related to the Heavenly Yuan Palace in the entire outer domain were suppressed by the United Alliance. The Wuji Pavilion had already sent 3 teams to be stationed at the gate of Yang City. The only city that was related to Tianyuan Palace was Yang City. All the disciples of Tianyuan Palace were basically gathered in Yang City to face the enemy together with the soldiers there. The terrible news came at noon that Yang City's General Duan Tian was seriously injured in order to defend against Nangong Fengyu's attack. In order to protect Yang City, General Duan Tian used all his strength to maintain the city protection formation of Yang City, and temporarily stopped the team from Wuji Pavilion from entering the palace. Duan Tian knew that only by protecting Yang City could he protect Tianyuan Palace. For that, Duan Tian paid the price and used up all his vitality. Even so, the city protection formation of Yang City might not be able to hold on for long. On the way, Kang Xinmu fell into deep thought. If he had not come to Tianyuan Palace when he came to the outer region, he might not have cared about this matter. However, not only did he go to Tianyuan Palace, but he also went to the forbidden area of Tianyuan Palace. It was reasonable for him to help Tianyuan Palace. Moreover, Tian Xingyi, the palace master of Tianyuan Palace, was his senior brother. How could he abandon his senior brother at such a time? However, what puzzled Kang Xinmu was that the place they arrived at after descending the mountain was not Yang City, but an unfamiliar jungle. Follow your senses and move forward. With your ability, you should be able to find the teleportation array. When the time comes, just activate it. Su Guang glanced at the jungle ahead and said. Kang Xinmu finally understood. Martial uncle Su Guang and senior apprentice brother Tianqing wanted to send him out of the Heaven Essence Palace. Martial uncle, senior martial brother, I've just arrived here. It's not suitable for me to wander around alone. Kang Xinmu held it in for a long time before he finally said these words. Su Guang raised his eyebrows and glanced at Kang Xinmu meaningfully. The enemies we are facing this time are the Wuji Pavilion and the United Alliance. It's not child's play. Martial uncle, I have something to tell you. Kang Xinmu decided not to hide the grudges between him and the disciples of Everlasting Pavilion in the sealed secret realm. I know everything about you, Su Guang said indifferently. Kang Xinmu suddenly felt awkward and scratched his head. The reason why the Everlasting Pavilion came to find trouble with the Heaven Essence Palace was definitely because the Heaven Essence Palace had shielded him. He was well aware of this. Just don't run away, Su Guang said and turned back. Kang Xinmu hurriedly followed Su Guang's footsteps. With Su Guang in the lead, the 3 quickly returned to the Heaven Essence Palace. The battlefield was basically concentrated near Yang City. Tianqing quickly informed the disciples of the Heaven Essence Palace and rushed to Yang City. Outside the Yang City gate, led by Nangong Fengyu, the group of people set up a base here. Moreover, it was not far from the city gate. Apart from the people of the Everlasting Pavilion, there were also some members of the United Alliance. Of course, there were also many sects outside the domain that had basically completed their defection in the past 2 days. More than half of the sects had chosen to join the Everlasting Pavilion. It could be said that the Heaven Essence Palace would not be able to survive this crisis unless a miracle happened. And this miracle was the one in the Tang village. This was the reason why Su Guang asked Tang Xiaoyu to return home. As long as Tang Xiaoyu could invite that existence, the Heaven Essence Palace might have a chance to survive this crisis. In fact, Su Guang also thought highly of Kang Xinmu. Although Kang Xinmu was only a junior of the Dragon God clan, based on the fact that Kang Xinmu had been chosen as the successor by Feng, Kang Xinmu was a talent that could be molded. Feng was a very picky person, regardless of whether it was his life or his cultivation. If he did not like the cultivation technique, he would not cultivate it. Take the 7 devouring demon sealing art for example. In that era, the 7 devouring demon sealing art was a very terrifying existence. When Feng cultivated the 7 devouring demon sealing art, he only had an attitude of trying. In the end, he did not cultivate for too long before he more or less understood the situation of the 7 devouring demon sealing art. He did not want to continue cultivating it. The last place they met was the other world. It had been hundreds of years since they last met. As for where Feng was now, he did not know. Master, there is something I would like to ask, Tian Xingyi said after thinking for a long time. You want to ask about Feng, right? If I could contact Feng, would not have gone to find help. Su Guang twitched his mouth. Tian Xingyi laughed softly. Kang Xinmu opened his mouth, but the word master did not come out. The three of them arrived at Sun City and roughly understood the situation there. The situation was far more serious than Kang Xinmu had imagined. Moreover, when they entered Sun City, Kang Xinmu sensed that there was a problem with the city protecting formation. He had not seen how the city protecting formation looked like at its peak, but the city protecting formation now could be easily broken by anyone using the space rampart. There is a problem with the city protecting formation. Su Guang strengthened the city protecting formation, and the situation was much better than before. Stay in Sun City and do not go anywhere. I will be back soon, Su Guang said solemnly. Yes, Master. Yes, Uncle Master. As soon as Su Guang finished speaking, his body turned into a cloud of green smoke and disappeared on the spot. Kang Xinmu felt the power of the realm from the green smoke. This must be Senior Su Guang's realm power. He could use space to achieve a kind of teleportation. Palace Master, there are guests from Upper State City. Just then, someone came to report. Tian Xingyi was shocked. The city protecting formation around Sun City had been in place since the Union Alliance was banned. Recently, the Everlasting Pavilion and the Union Alliance had been attacking fiercely. After the city protecting formation was activated, no one else could get close to Sun City. Apart from the strict inspection needed to enter Sun City, there was also the Everlasting Pavilion's forces stationed at the city gates. Anyone who wanted to enter Sun City had to go through this first. Hence, they could not get close to Sun City. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.